Welcome in to Manning's. We're getting ready to open the doors here. It's On Texas Football live from New Orleans. I tell you what, guys, we've got it all here. We got Rod B piped in from the Austin capital city. What do you want to call Austin these days, Rod? What's the nickname?
Hopefully we call it the title town, baby. Hopefully that's what we're talking about. Yeah, that's what we talk. Happy New Year to everybody. Hopefully that's what we're gonna call it pretty soon. But yeah, man, I'm excited. I wish I was there with you guys. I know y'all having a lot of fun, but man, hopefully, like I said, we'll be talking in H-Town. That's what we're talking about. So let's get it on, man. I'm excited. I'm tired of talking about this damn thing. I'm ready to do it.
Rod, you and I are gonna have to go back home and have a little talk because you and I are both from Houston. If the Longhorns are in Houston next week, I've got to have a party to match all parties. I got to tell you that's going to happen. Hey, CJ Vogel alongside with us. CJ, welcome in. You are up from your stupor from last night. I'm sure he's a little bit younger than us, Rod. I know he stayed out past midnight. You and I did not. CJ, Rod, big game, 4-point spread. Interestingly, the over and under, according to CJ, is down now to 62.5, which means a full point less than perhaps what we talked about.
Yeah, no, I think it's something that was a trend that we saw earlier in the preparation of Washington, Texas coming into this game, because I think this is a game that starts out slow. For as much as we've talked about both teams starting fast coming into this game, for whatever reason, I look at this game and think it's going to be a possession battle early on in this game. There's, the touchdowns, the drives, the possessions are going to be at a premium to begin the game. And for that reason, I think it's going to be a little bit of a slower start. Obviously, with teams going for it, being aggressive early in the game, as we've seen from Sarkisian so often. So it makes sense. Defense wins championships, and we're in championship territory right now.
I went 33-30 for Texas. Rod, you had it in that same range.
Yep.
And that just makes total sense because that's where Vegas comes out on this.
Yeah, I mean, Vegas likes Washington a little bit. I mean, you look at, I think Kalen DeBoer 4-0 as an underdog, right? As a betting underdog. They're a good underdog team. They're 13-0, but the reason they keep getting doubted over and over again, this is a team that each of their last 9 wins this season came by 10 points or fewer. They're accustomed to winning tight games. So I'm kind of with CJ. I don't actually know how the game is going to play out throughout the game. I just feel like it's coming down to the last possession. I feel like it's going to come down to a potential game-winning drive. It's going to come down to Texas making a game-winning stop, which we've seen them do this season. All right, we've seen game-winning drives. We've seen Texas close out opponents. We've seen them finish teams in the fourth quarter. That's what I feel like it's going to take in this game. I feel like it's going to take a last possession. And, Michael Penix, I mean, he's got 5 game-winning drives in his career. So, I'm a little hesitant, all right, to have to believe that it'll come down to that, even if Texas has to play defense against it. But I do believe that that's the way the game's going to play out. I think Texas is in a great position. They've been clutch all year long, even when they haven't necessarily been playing their best, most complete football. They've been clutch in critical moments. That's what this entire game is going to be about. It's about being clutch. And I think it'll come down to those, like I said, Washington's been able to, really win pull-out games late in clutch time. I think Texas has been a clutch team. I think it'll come down to that.
Interesting enough, I want to touch in on this because at Texas, the end of games, we've seen it a few times this year in close games, their ability to close out ball games. Alabama was obviously the one that jumps off the page, but how about TCU as well? That third down conversion to A.D. Mitchell sealed the deal, and that's something that I think Texas a year ago struggled with just enough to prevent them from winning the games that they wanted to. So while Penix does have the opportunity and the experience of walking down the field and scoring the go-ahead score, Texas also has the resume offensively to keep the opposing team off the field late in games. I wonder if that'll come into a, kind of play tonight.
Look, I think we got to look at all pieces of this. I mean, there are so many elements. We finished Coffee and Football off this morning with a question about turnovers. We got into special teams. I mean, there are so many elements that we want to cuss and discuss for as long as we can. And thankfully, we've got quite a bit of time here this morning into the afternoon. People just now coming in. Welcome. Happy New Year. Hook 'em. Yeah, everybody going this morning. We should have a lot of fun here talking about it. I want to say this while we're having a watch party or pre-watch tailgate party here. With the help of CJ, I went back and looked at some of the major watch parties that I'm aware of around the state and around the country. So Texas fans know this. All right, let's start with the Longhorn Ice House in Dallas. Then you have also Abilene has Mulligan's, Little Woodrow's in San Antonio, Stone Oak edition, Little Woodrow's in Houston. DC is Penn Quarter Sports Tavern. New Braunfels is at Reserve 1483. New York City is at Stout Grand Central. Chicago is at Cubby Bear.
Right.
That's a good place to have it.
That's a great bar name.
And then LA, because it's so spread out, has 3 different ones. West Hollywood's at State Social. South Bay is at Baja Sharkees. And Santa Monica is Tavern on Main. All of those Texas groups doing official watch parties, which benefit scholarships for students at the University of Texas. All right, long term to go here. CJ Vogel, I'm Bobby Burton. Rod Babers alongside. Rod, say hello to the folks here that are already here in Manning's.
Look at this.
Hey, Happy New Year, y'all. Happy New Year and hook 'em horns, baby. It's a beautiful time to be a Texas Longhorn, ain't it? 2024. It's just getting brighter and brighter. It's getting brighter and brighter.
All right, Rod, I'm going to go to you here and talk a little game plan. One thing that CJ's been harping on the last week or so is the quickness with which Washington scores in the first half. 7th in the country in scoring in the first quarter, Washington is. 1st in the country scoring in the second quarter. What do you think Texas does to come out and try to thwart that out of the gate on defense?
Well, honestly, I think it needs to be something that they do as a team, right? It needs to be complementary football. That keeps that Washington offense off the field. So if Texas can put together some long sustained drives or put more pressure on Washington by scoring early themselves, I do think, you could see Washington struggle just a little bit or maybe make a mistake pushing just a little bit. That is where they do their best work, but Sark also is great in game planning preparation. It's going to be a really good test for Sark because I think usually Texas wins the battle of game planning preparation. Oftentimes Texas gets up big in games, get big leads. Where we saw Texas struggle often was winning the chess match within the game, the battle of adjustments. This year, Sark has been magnificent being able to do that. That's why Texas finds themselves right now playing for the championship in the semifinal here. But I do think the way to guard against it is not just for the defense. We'll get into the details of the defensive game plan here. But I do think Texas keeping the ball away, putting together long sustained drives, keeping that really prolific, dangerous, lethal Washington offense on the bench might be the best way overall to play defense against it.
Yeah, just real quick on that point, because that's exactly the approach that I see Texas taking, is being kind of, I don't want to say possession dominant, but making those possessions matter.
Yep.
Whether or not you're moving the ball down the field into scoring position, but taking time off the clock in that same kind of essence. I look back to the Alabama final drive where they were able to take off 7.5, kind of 7.5 and plus of game time to seal the win. I think that was the second longest drive Sarkisian has had since taking over the Texas job. There was a drive, his first, I want to say UTSA 2021 was the longest drive that Texas has had. It was the only one that spanned 8 minutes. Texas, Alabama to seal the win was the second longest drive that he has had. So it's not like it's a common thing under Sarkisian at Texas to really see Texas string out these long, strenuous possessions. But in a game like tonight, where you cannot allow Washington to string together multiple consecutive scoring possessions in a row without giving your defense a breath, That's going to be crucial. And if you can combine taking off a lot of clock while adding points, it's going to be a good combination there for the Texas offense. So I like that one a lot, Rod.
Great nugget there, CJ.
I look at this, and I agree it has to be complimentary. Sark has to come out firing on all cylinders as well. And use some clock is essentially what you're saying. And he's not necessarily want to do that. That is a little different than him. What do you think about that? I mean, I wrote down red zone because when CJ first talked about that and when you talked about it, Rod, it was about dominoing. It was actually making not a field goal, but a touchdown. You know, and the importance of that in a game where we think that easily could be in the 30s, if not 40s.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to that Oklahoma State game, right? The Big 12 title game. Truth is, Texas has been a subpar, below average red zone offense all season long. The only real true outlier to that was that Oklahoma State game, the Big 12 title game, where they were at 5 of 5 in the red zone. If Texas is going to be that good in the red zone, there's no doubt they're going to win this game. They just haven't been that good in the red zone. Really, one of the only things holding them back, even the one loss against Oklahoma, it came down to their performance in the red zone or lack thereof, right? They had a turnover in the red zone, goal line stand that went against them in the red zone there. I mean, that's really what was the kind of Achilles heel of this offense all season long. And even Sark and his offensive brilliance, he couldn't figure it out all season long. He was working it, I'm sure he was throwing multiple, kind of different antidotes toward the problem, trying to remedy it, and he just could not really figure it out. And I think he had accepted, like we all did, this team is just they're not a perfect team, they're not a perfect offense. Even though they have all these great weapons, they just struggle in the red zone. And a lot of it's based on some of it's on Quinn, some of it was on the offensive line, some of it was on Sark himself in the play calling. He even admitted as such earlier in the season. But then that Oklahoma State game, even Mike Gundy said this team looked better in real time than they looked on film. I'm thinking to myself, well, what do you mean they're a top 10 team? They look really good on film. I watch them on film all the time. I think what he was referring to was the red zone. And I think he thought, man, we'll have a chance in this game because they'll get to the red zone, and that's when we'll make our plays. That's when we'll make a stand. They'll somehow screw it up, penalties. I mean, even that Tech game, guys, they dominated that Tech game, scored in all three phases, still were terrible in the red zone. That's just something I think we had come to accept. If they're going to be 5 of 5 good in the red zone in this game against Washington, they're going to win. There's no doubt.
I 100% agree. We haven't seen the punting unit for Texas on the field a whole lot this year. And I think that's encouraging. But with that, Texas is able to get into opponent territory very often. I mean, it's seemingly almost every drive. But with that said, you cannot settle for field goals in a game like this. Obviously, points are going to be what you want to add to the board at any time. But settling for 3 against an offense like Washington will leave you behind at the end of the game clock. Texas has attempted, Bert Auburn has attempted the most field goal attempts of any kicker in the entire country. While good that he has a lot of experience and, attempts kicking the football, that's not what you want in a game like this. You want those, the only kick you want is him kicking a PAT. You want that ball punched into the end zone, and you got to add 6-7 points a drive to keep up with Washington. So, Rod, I'm right there with you. If there's ever time to break tendency and really find out ways to get into the end zone, it's in a game like this.
That's what Rob was talking about, I thought, CJ, against Oklahoma State when they went 5 for 5 in the red zone. I remember Rod talking about that in the post game. It was the worm turning. It was what he wanted to see this whole year, was the idea of that's how you step on their throat.
Absolutely.
An opponent's throat is you score 7 instead of 3. And I'll tell you what, go back to the Oklahoma State game, maybe all the trickery, the throwback to JT Sanders or Jay Back, that was a man run, and he broke a tackle. Otherwise, they're sitting at 2nd and goal from the 3.
Yep.
I mean, those are the kind of runs they have to do. Hey, we talked to a reporter from the folks at the Locked On Huskies podcast this morning, and he had some interesting things to say. He said that they are a little concerned about Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat, naturally. But on defense, he said their tackling has been less than stellar. And that's what leads me to that Cedric Baxter conversation. Maybe Jaden Blue, maybe A.D. Mitchell or Jordan Whittington, Jatavian Sanders getting loose. That could be interesting. I didn't know they were I don't want to say a poor tackling team because they wouldn't be here if they're poor. But if it's been an issue, that's interesting to me.
Yeah, the trick play bag. We've seen Xavier Worthy throw the football before.
Mm-hmm.
A game like tonight, it wouldn't surprise me if Sarkisian goes that deep into the bag to see it once again. The tackling's interesting, and I want to point out the Texas running back specifically because that's been a strength ever since Roshan, Bijan, even dating back prior to them. But the Texas running back's ability, and this is C.J. Baxter's strength now, of being able to create missed tackles is something that is really important in a game like this. Being able to stretch drives, continue to get those 2 to 3 to 4 extra yards after contact goes a long way. It wears down a defense, and especially whenever you consider the late game kind of moments when you really got to get into field goal range, being able to break an arm tackle is going to be huge. So I look for Tashard Choice's group of not only CJ Baxter breaking tackles, but Jaden Blue's speed to really kind of help Texas push the ball down the field and get into a field goal range if needed, especially in the passing game.
To CJ's point, and we talked about this earlier about Texas putting together long, sustained drives. Just play keep away. Best defense maybe just a great offense, so you can convert and keep Michael Penix and those wide receivers on the bench. Running the football strategically, I think it's going to be a big part of that for Texas. To the point that you brought up earlier, Bobby, that the podcaster said that he's concerned about missed tackles. Pro Football Focus says that Washington has missed the third most missed tackles in the Power 5 this year, according to them, 159. So That's a big number. And combine that with what CJ just talked about, Texas running backs, even obviously Bijan and Rojo are a big part of that, but even post Bijan and Rojo, Jonathan Brooks, CJ Baxter, Jaden Blue have also shown a unique ability to force missed tackles, to break tackles. If you can do that in this game, if Washington can't tackle Texas and Sark sees that, he's going to double down on running the football or double down on getting his athletes the ball in space. And we know he's done that a lot, right? Whether he goes the pony package and it's Keelan Robinson with about 3 to 5 yards of space, and guys got to make the determination whether, all right, am I going to try to cut him off from getting to the edge? Because if I do that and he makes one cut, I'm in the spin cycle. Right? I'm gonna fly right past him. Or I can try to, I can try to gauge it a little bit as a defender. I can try my best to try to, close the gap on him and see if I can catch him before he makes it to the edge. And then that's also a fool's errand. You can do that with JT. We've seen him do that with JT in the screen game. Sark loves dialing up screens with a lot of misdirection. We've seen him do that with Xavier Worthy. If they can't tackle Texas, just in the running game, Sark's going to dial up easy completions to get guys the ball in space, and it's going to be a long day for Washington. I think they'll tackle better. They know they're a bad tackling team. Listen, it's like Texas being bad at defending certain concepts. My nigga, what you been working on for the last month? You got a month to work on it. These are 2 good coaching staff. The things you've been really, really bad at, I expect you to improve on those elements at least a little, considering you had so much time off to address them. And watching 12, 13 games, we all have done the tracking. I got the notes and everything. We know what Texas is good and what they're bad at. Same thing with Washington. So I actually think they'll probably be better at tackling in this game than we expect. Just like I think Texas pass defense will be better at defending some of those troublesome concepts, just because what the hell you been working on? What you been doing?
I want to ask real quick, Rod, get your thoughts, Bobby, as well. Is tackling after a month off, is that not something that is a slow adjustment to the speed of the game once you get going, or is that a concern at all? Texas hasn't played in a month.
Yeah. No, it is a concern. I heard an interview with Chris Peterson. I brought this up earlier on one of our live streams. Chris Peterson, former coach of Washington, and he brought up the fact that one of his biggest issues was the layoff during the bowl game and having the physicality translate. All right, from the season to the bowl game when you have that long layoff. And he remarked that he had regrets as a coach about dialing it back so much during that time because he thought it affected the physicality of his team. And he talked about that, and he said that's a challenge for coaches because the one thing you want to safeguard against is injuries. All right, you don't want guys got enough of an injury risk when they play in the game. You don't want to have injury risk when you play. Well, obviously when you're practicing, and football's a sport, right? You practice more than you play, and you're trying your best to simulate and replicate real time game reps. But it's almost impossible. But you're doing your best. That's why Sark said we went good on good. We made sure we went good on good. Good on good means ones on ones. And I'm sure that I don't know if they tackled to the ground, but there was probably some thudding up and they, hit, and then coaches blew the whistle. But you're right, man. Tackling, even like I said, Chris Peterson mentioned, that's one of the things that suffers in bowl games. He said oftentimes it reminded him of game one. Some of the same issues that popped up: ball security, tackling, special teams miscues, just things that you're like, man, what the hell? We've been practicing this, but that long layoff, you're right. It affects the intensity. It affects the urgency, the mental reps, all that it does. So we'll see which one of these teams handles that a little bit better. That's on the coaching staff, but I think that's why you go good on good. So you can try to replicate that speed. And hey, man, you got to get there and get yourself in the right position with the right leverage, and as much as you can as a coach without putting the guys high at injury risk.
You mentioned my first question was actually about how do you attack a team that is a poor tackling team or a poorer one? And you said double down on running the ball. The other issue there is a year ago, Washington had an interior defensive line that really could clog the middle. They lost that guy this year. And so you add that together, maybe what we saw a year ago where Washington had that big guy in the middle. Maybe this year it's different, maybe Texas can create a run game that they couldn't last year in the Alamo Bowl.
Not even the run game specifically, but Sarkisian has been so good at getting his running backs the balls in space, whether it be the little jet motion or orbit motion specifically, the half return, the dump down pass that we've seen so often. I look at Keelan Robinson, what he's done in his kind of fit molded role of getting the ball out of the backfield specifically, where defensive backs don't want to tackle anybody. People know that. Rod, you might disagree with me here.
No, I agree with you. That's why I'm laughing.
But I don't think defensive backs specifically want to tackle a CJ Baxter in space moving towards the edge. So that's something I think Texas will look to at least early on in the game. Get chunk yards, easy yards that way by getting the ball out on the edge and forcing them to come down the field and tackle them.
All right. I want to say thank you to our sponsor. One of our sponsors today is John Donovan. John and his group at Longhorn Wealth Management have been sponsoring us for a good football season now. I think we're 12-1 since John started sponsoring.
Hey.
John's a proud Texas X's Life member, and his wife and all 6 of his siblings are also UT grads. So it is this deep Longhorn family tradition that led John to dedicate his firm to providing total wealth management for Texas alumni, employees, family, and friends. John is a certified financial planner who has spent over 30 years providing investment and retirement, insurance, and estate planning services and solutions to his clients. So please give John Donovan and his Longhorn Wealth team a call at 972-707-4900 or visit longhornwealth.net. CJ, I want to go back on something that I said earlier, just giving people a list of where folks are watching the party. We're here at Manning's Live right now. Crowd's just starting to settle in. There's going to be over 1,000 people here. Yeah, it's going to be crazy. Should be a lot of fun. But I'm looking at the watch parties. In Dallas, it's at the Longhorn Ice House. In Houston, it's at Little Woodrow's. In San Antonio, it's at Little Woodrow's in Stone Oak. Then you have some places like New Braunfels. is at Reserve, 1863 in Abilene, Mulligan's. Look over some others. New York City is at Stout, Grand Central, Chicago, Cubby Bear, and then LA is at State Social in West Hollywood, Baja, Sharkees in South Bay, and Tavern on Main in Santa Monica. Just to give you a feel for the reach of the Longhorn, so to speak. They are here and everywhere right now.
Love it.
Along the Longhorn lifetime. I just I love when Longhorn can get together right now and really talk. No watch party in College Station. Well, they may have to, they may have to go to Navasota or something.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. Go to Marlin, where Jure Bledsoe and Darian Gillette they just take a 45-minute drive up to Marlin.
There you go.
I think that as we talk about it, this has been a season, guys, where a lot of Longhorn fans have felt like they could unite. Finally, there wasn't. Everybody wanted the backup quarterback, even though there's a lot of talk about the backup quarterback. It wasn't a year where the defense was giving away games. It wasn't a lot of, other than the Oklahoma game. I felt like the Longhorns came together and played together well. And in my opinion, that's probably the story of this year, is that turning of the corner from being a team that was just okay. I mean, 8-5 is good. It's a lot better than 5-7 or 6-7, whatever, Texas was in the previous years. But my point being, that big move for me has been the story of this year. It's been the transcendence of the Texas program and where it's headed and where it is today.
I think above anything else, it is the complementary football that we've continued to see increase and improve week to week. That wasn't always a strength for Texas. We know the offense at times had kind of stagnated in second halves, especially early in Sarkisian's career at Texas. There wasn't always a consistent movement and point scoring effect that we've seen from the offense. We've seen that more efficiently this year. We've seen it more consistently this year. And on top of that, this defense and the step that it's continued to make year in and year out under PK, I don't think there's a Texas fan watching this game right now that should be clamoring at all about what this defensive staff is doing. It's been incredible what they've been able to produce, how they've been able to develop. And at the end of the day, whether things go right or wrong for Texas tonight, Texas is sitting as a top 4 team in the country, something that they've not been in a position to do since what, Bobby? 2009, 14, 15 years almost. So, yeah, I love what Texas is doing offensively, obviously, but that defensive side of the ball and what PK is able to do has me very excited for the future moving forward, because I know that offense will still be good. It's the young guys that are stepping in immediately, showing that they can play ball, and it's that defense being schematically sound and not letting up the deep pass or broken runs really, bite them in the rear.
They're not a one-trick pony right now. They're playing well on offense, defense, and special teams. Ron, what do you think of that?
No, I like what you said earlier about, Longhorn fans, have a product they can be proud of. That's why they're coming out in mass, right? Longhorn fans, and they're all around the globe pretty much. And they're going to be trying to, today they want to try to fellowship, right? This is basically what it's about. And you haven't had a lot of these moments because Texas football hadn't been at this height. And it feels like, as the late, great DKR put it, and Mac Brown so oftentimes put it as well, it feels like the BBs are starting to be put back in the box. They got the Holy Trinity behind the scenes with, Jay Hartzell and, Kevin Eltife and CDC, making sure that things are stabilized. And I'll give a shout out to the BMDs out there, the big money donors and boosters out there. Oftentimes, these folks were behind the scenes because the NCAA was behind the times. The new law of the land, NIL, has allowed these folks who a lot of times they just love their university and they want to give back and they want to show love and they obviously want the brand to always be seen in a certain light, and they wanted to achieve a certain standard, right? The pride and winning tradition of the Texas Longhorns will not be entrusted to the weak nor the timid. They believe it, and they want to put their resources behind it. And oftentimes, back in the day before NIL, these guys had, and ladies and gentlemen had to operate, in a under the table way at times, and they just weren't allowed, in my opinion, to show that love in a very kind of outward way and let it be known. And now NIL has allowed them to weaponize that, I guess, that allegiance to the Longhorn brand. And I think it's made a difference. Now, I'm not saying Sark hasn't done this thing. Sark's done a great job. I think this is like, all of the different factors and variables are coming together at the right time. But I do think the, ability of Texas, we talked about TexasOneFund.org, shout out, the ability of Texas to be able to unite its community and then weaponize that through NIL has been substantial. And I do think it's mattered. And I think if you weren't necessarily a leader in that space, it will be hurting Texas athletics. I think the fact that Texas is also a leader in that space as well is also helping power and push the program in the right direction. Sark, on the other hand, has done a great job. That's why he talks about culture a lot. Just like social media has affected everybody's ability to raise a child, because it's now the kind of the new culture, the ecosystem that we live in. It's harder to, I think, have a positive culture this day and age with the transfer portal and with NIL being the law of the land. It's tough. And Sark, even though this landscape is drastically changing and it's, like I said, making it very difficult to have a true, authentic culture, he's managed to still create one in this realm. And I think that has also helped his team. That comes back to him being an authentic human and other stuff that, we can get into later. But I do think you got to give Texas a lot of credit for that. That's a macro topic, not about the game itself. But I do think it's something worth addressing.
I think NIL is certainly a part of it. I think that uniting the Longhorn fan base makes that easier to be a part of, though. I mean, I think that I actually think it starts with Steve Sarkisian as much as it does L-Tyfe, Hartzell, and CDC. And the reason I say that is because I've seen Tom Herman not get the same support because, frankly, Tom Herman wasn't always a real likable guy, right? And some of the things going on behind the scenes of the program weren't something that people really thought they wanted to support. And, of course, Charlie Strong, there were some issues there as well. And so I feel like the 5 and 7 year really got it started and reinforced to Sark what he needed to do. And then from there, everybody else was ready. From going from 5 to 7 to 8 and 5, that told them, okay, let's put some resources here and let's really push Texas forward on all cylinders, not just one or two. Rod talked about putting the BBs back in the box. You marshal all the efforts together with Texas, and that's when Texas could be one of the great programs in college football.
Yeah, to that point, no longer are kids on the team hosting recruits and telling them they shouldn't be here. That's not what we're seeing in 2023 and now 2024, because this is such a desirable spot to go play football. Rod, you've talked about it at length. When Texas is winning football games the way that they are currently, it is so hard to recruit against Texas. Everything about the Longhorns and their program and their university, the combination of everything that they provide is amongst the best in the country, regardless of whether or not they're winning or not. But adding in the fact that they're a top 4 team, they have a conference championship under their belt this year, the ball's rolling and it's going fast, and it doesn't look like there's going to be a catcher behind there to stop it. So that was encouraging. And I think especially the culture that you mentioned, you lose guys like Roshan, you lose guys like Bijan and DeMarvio and Overshown, even in the middle of Morrow and Keandre Coburn. These are all guys who commanded respect of the locker room. All guys that are veteran experience. They have the NFL talent. They're looked up upon inside the locker room. And for that locker room to even be more close-knit from what I've heard behind the scenes than it was a year ago is a testament to what Sarkisian and his staff have built right now and going forward. It's only going to be, a mainstay moving forward for this Texas Longhorn football program.
Well said.
All right. You mentioned the ball rolling downhill. Well, 4:30 today, it may continue rolling. Anthony Deuce Williams out of Pearland's Shadow Creek expected to make his decision. He would be the 4th verbal commitment for the Longhorns in this recruiting campaign. for 2025. Dominic McKinley, though, last night, the defensive lineman out of Lafayette, Louisiana, committed to LSU. So we kind of scratched him off the list. He was down there at Under Armour and made that. But that's the kind of thing we're talking about with the ball rolling down the hill or the avalanche happening, whatever, euphemism or metaphor you want to use.
It 100% is. And the best thing about this, Bobby, all these kids are so talented. You talk about Texas being in position to land a 5-star defensive interior defensive lineman, albeit, ended up at LSU, but there's still a very talented kid out of Mississippi that Texas is very much in the mix for and has been since, prior to the early signing day. Moving back to February, that will be where Texas looks. Alex Foster is who I'm talking about. If there were any questions, I know a lot of folks are tuning in for the big game, but a little bit recruiting talk is always on the top of the mind. Alex Foster is now where Texas will be pushing. Jaylen Evans obviously signed with Texas A&M. Dominic McKinley, as you mentioned last night, committed to LSU. The flip from Texas A&M. Alex Foster, put all your chips in the middle and push them in. We're in a casino town with Harrah's and Caesars right down the street. I haven't been there yet, believe it or not. So that's where we're at right now. Alex Foster, it looks like Texas will be making a full push for February signing day at the end of the cycle. Looking at another interior defensive lineman for Bo Davis.
That's interesting. Yeah. Can I just say this real quick? Because CJ brought up the talent thing. To think that this team, this is what Sark and his staff have shown us, right? The really the core of this team, the soul of it, are guys they inherited, right? Kind of the soul of the team is guys. Most of the guys are kind of guys they inherited and developed, right? Your Tavondre Sweats of the world, your Jahdae Barons of the world on defense, right? Look at what Jaylen Ford and what he's doing, and kind of it's interesting that they have yet to show us, and I think they will, that when they recruit their kind of guys with maybe even higher upside in specifically for their system, that the possibilities are endless, right? The sky's the limit potentially, because Sark really and his crew, they really brought, I think, what the missing piece and the missing ingredient for Texas football over the last few years has been development or lack thereof. Texas hasn't developed the talent. You guys have been covering recruiting. You've been bringing in high level talent in the last 15 years or so. I mean, that really hasn't changed that much. The fact that they haven't been developing that talent, that has become the narrative. That's why you had guys like Garrett Wilson saying, "No, I can't go there, man. They don't develop talent really that well." I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what the young man said. That was a reputation that Texas had gotten in the last decade plus. And Sark and them are now shifting that narrative. They're shattering that narrative, I should say. And I think that's a big part of it. And that's why the future is really bright. If the guys they're recruiting now have higher upsides, and these are the guys that they actually are handpicking, as opposed to the guys that they had to inherit and obviously develop into being NFL caliber players, it's going to be a really, really bright future for Texas.
I would say one thing to that, Rod. In the last 5 years, they've had a real problem attracting that elite talent. And Sark has done a tremendous job of changing that. So Quinn Ewers, Xavier Worthy, Arch Manning, Anthony Hill, Kelvin Banks, those are all 5-star guys.
Yep.
That, with the exception of Arch Manning, who hasn't really seen much time, they're all matching or exceeding expectations. And because of that, I think they're going to be seeing more of those 5-star guys saying, "Hey, Texas is a place I can go develop at." And that'll, feed the monster even more.
Yeah, on top of that, look at where Texas is getting this talent now. It's all in the trenches. Of course, the secondary and the receivers and the running backs will be there because of how attractive it is to play at the University of Texas. But that was never really the case under Tom Herman, that elite offensive lineman wanted to come play at Texas. It's been how long since Texas has had a first-round offensive lineman taken? They're in position now to have Kelvin Banks, DJ Campbell certainly working his way up draft boards next year, Christian Jones, from where he was prior to where this staff, I guess prior to where he was to when this staff arrived, to where he is today. I don't think you've seen a Texas Longhorn make a bigger leap developmentally since I've started covering Texas football. So it's a credit to him. It's a credit to Kyle Flood, Steve Sarkisian, and that entire staff, because that's never been a strength for Texas since I've been, old enough to comprehend what was happening on the football field. Yep. We're at a position now to look at that offensive lineman room specifically and say, yeah, they're going to be set for a while. And the guys that they're attracting, obviously Brandon Baker is the big 5-star guy, but Daniel Cruz is a guy that we both like, and Nate Kibble with his arm length and ability to move inside the line. They're getting guys right now who project to be multi-year contributors and starters in the SEC. And that's very encouraging among anything else.
All right. We're live at Manning's down near Harris Casino, Fulton Alley area. Please come join us if you get a chance. If you already got your tickets, please join us. We're open here until about 6 or 7 o'clock. They're going to actually have the game on. You can stay here if you don't have tickets as well. A couple of news and notes coming nationally. Cam Ward, the Washington State quarterback, was looking at transferring to either Miami or Florida State. It comes through today that he's entering the NFL draft instead. So Florida State and Miami are back to the drawing board for a portal transfer quarterback. Miami really needed him. Florida State really needed him. If you watched them play on Saturday, they could have used somebody other than the guy they had at quarterback for sure. Also, I'm Bobby Burton alongside CJ Vogel to my left. Rod Babers back holding the fort down in Austin, Texas. Rod, I want to get to you, and I try to lean on you a lot because you've actually been in big games. Like, I've covered big games. You've played in big games. There's a fundamental difference between the two things. You talk about having the bubble guts. I like that term because I've had those before. Like, you just know you're nervous, right?
Yeah.
Sark gave the kids off yesterday afternoon. Let them go hang out with their family, go do whatever they wanted. Yes, they had curfew. I think it was 9 o'clock or something like that. But he let them go hang out, be with their friends and family a little bit. Is that the right approach, you think? Let them try to be, what do we call it? Loose, I guess, is the right perspective?
I think so. I mean, at this point, you could have walkthroughs if you want to, and maybe have a couple of meetings. But why would you do that? At this point, the game plan's in. The guys, they've had all the reps and the mental reps. At this point, you don't want to put more pressure on them than there already is. There's a ton of pressure in this game. That's why guys play tight. In my experience in big games, if guys play tight, it's because of the magnitude of the moment, the pressure. They realize how many eyes are on them. They realize what's at stake. I'm sure the guys all know that, of course, but you don't want that to be top of mind for the guys when they go out there and play. What you want to be top of mind for these guys is what they're playing for, all right? And what matters to them is the name on the front of the jersey and the name on the back of the jersey. And you're playing for your family, whether it be the name on the back or your family's name on the front that makes your Longhorn family. So, that's what you realize, right? And I think that's why he wants them, hey, go have some time off. And you play for each other, right? That's your Longhorn family. So if you guys want to hang out and y'all want to do stuff on your own, go do it. But go hang out with your family, go hang out with each other. And remember, that's why you play the game. I mean, that's your inspiration. So if you want to inspire the guys before the game, I like the way he inspired them. Like, go hang out with your family. We'll come back. And then everybody remembers what the mission is. So I like that. So guys won't be too tight. Sometimes coaches are always going to be tight. I mean, that's just because all coaches are worried about worst case scenario. They're stressing about it. And that's a coach's job. I always say before the game, coaches should oftentimes think about the worst case scenarios. What if your game plan doesn't work? What are you going to do? What happens if, something, there's an injury to this player, that player? What would be your options? You can troubleshoot that and have a think tank session as a coach. But, as a players, no, man, you want them playing loose. I remember when Mac Brown told us before the Big 12 title game that if we won that game because of the outcome of college football, we'd have had a chance to play the national title game. And I think a lot of guys played tight as a result of that. I think it was a calculated risk by Mac Brown to inform us of that information because we didn't have social media back then. But you could argue it might have been a miscalculation because some guys played tight, some guys played loose, some guys played, with their heart on the line because they understood what was at stake. And I think ultimately coaches have to make that determination. I think Sark decided, I want us loose. Sark teams are loose. We play our best football when we're loose.
What do you think?
I'm right there with you. I mean, this is one of those things where I think you have to understand where you are. Where you are not only on a grand scheme of things nationally and what this means, in pursuit of a national championship, but you're also in New Orleans. You're playing in the Superdome. You're in a city that's a lot of fun. A lot of family and friends are coming down to watch you play in a big game. Being relaxed and, really enjoying the moment, which is something Sarkisian has mentioned a few times in press conferences, is something that I think helps his team really come into this game not thinking that every single play is going to be the end of the world. It's one of those things where, yes, you want to have the focus, you want to have the intensity on each snap, but play loose, play free, play to your style of football and not over your shoot or over your sleds in a way that, we've seen time and time again where the moment gets a little bit too big, lights get too bright. That's not what you want in a game like this. You want your guys playing loose, playing free, as you said, Rod. And I think it's, a moment that these guys will cherish forever, but also the opportunity to look ahead to play in Houston is something that I think is the top of their mind as well, because they know what is at stake, but also enjoying the moment and living, to play in a pretty exciting game tonight, I think is very, very fun for them.
Yeah, I read an article that Sark says, when somebody asks him, how's your day going? He always says, it's the greatest effing day of my life, right? I mean, it is. He's that kind of guy with that mentality. So I agree with CJ. He wants them to enjoy it, man. It's a guy that's been down. He's been down and out. He talked about how he couldn't get an interview before, and now he's at the heights, right, of the coaching realm, probably where he should have been if he didn't get sidetracked. But you would argue that's what kind of built the football coach and DNA and character that you see before you. So I think he, like CJ said, he wants these guys to have fun because he knows these moments are fleeting. You may never get back to this situation before. We hope you will, but just so the guys for themselves, they should have time to reflect on it themselves too.
I cherish the moment, right? Enjoy while you're there. And I want to bring up this comment while we're doing that, just so this young man can do that for with his dad. Chris Roberts, guys, love this show and watch you guys every day. I'm on the road headed to the game right now. Can you give my Dylan Roberts a hook 'em horns for good luck tonight? Hook 'em, Dylan.
Hook 'em, Dylan.
Hook 'em, baby. Hook 'em.
That's making memories. That's the good stuff. We're going to take a few questions now from the audience. If you guys want to get some in, feel free to ask as well here. I've got a pen and paper if you guys want to come up and grab something. But I want to ask also the audience online right now that's joining us. This from Jackie McCardle Jr. What tendencies do you think Washington will break today? What do you think Washington will do to break tendency?
Tempo. Yep. Tempo. It just makes too much sense, right? Texas has struggled in 2-minute drill. When you go look at 2-minute drill, third downs, Texas is allowing teams convert over 42% of third downs in 2-minute drill. They've struggled when they have big leads, 20-plus point leads, and teams get in what is basically 2-minute mode when they go up tempo. K-State, go look at U of H, TCU's in that category too. Texas has struggled. We know famously their only loss of the season versus Oklahoma. Oklahoma is top 15 in the country, usually in plays per minute and tempo and pace. That's what Jeff Lovey does well. It wore out the defensive front a little bit. Also forces Texas to leave in the same defensive unit so they can't rotate. So if you like the group that's in there and it's not T'Vondre Sweat or Byron Murphy, you probably want to go tempo, keep that group on the field. So yeah, I fear, but this is not something that Washington likes to do. They're like 75th in the country in plays per minute. They don't want to go tempo. They like to hunt matchups and take their time. I can see them doing it though, and CJ agrees. This tempo is it potentially.
Yeah, Washington actually snaps the football every 27 seconds, which is 84th, right around that 75 range. So not something that we see very often from Washington. But to your point, Rod, I think what we'll see tonight is not necessarily a quicker snap count from Washington, but a quicker lineup get to the ball. That way, like you said last night, it doesn't allow Texas to keep the fresh bodies on the interior, especially when it comes to Byron Murphy, T'Vondre Sweat. If there's ever a string of possession or a string of snaps, Rod, like you mentioned last night, where those guys are off the field, you can almost guarantee there's going to be a little bit of a hurry up there to ensure that they're unable to come back onto the field. And I think that's something to note right now. Washington also gets to the ball quickly, but they don't snap it. So you'll see them line up. You'll see them maybe make a shift or two, give a dummy count, and then look to the sideline to get a new audible, a new play call, new formation, whatever it might be. There's always something that they do pre-snap that gives the defense fits, and that's what we'll see tonight, especially, like you said, if they go tempo, that's going to be something to watch for, and certainly on the Texas side to see how they adjust to it.
Good stuff.
Hey, Rod, let me ask you another question here. This from Miles. Put the best cover DB on their second best receiver, and then your second best DB on their best receiver with help. What do you think of that idea?
No, I don't see PK doing anything like that because it'll change the structural integrity of the defense too much. I mean, first of all, who's their best cover DB? You got to determine that first. Who's the best cover DB? Jahdae Barron's your best cover DB? Is it Malik Muhammad's your best cover DB? First of all, you got to think which guys that going to be, and then because they move around their receivers a lot, those guys they shift and move a lot. You would have to shadow them, or you're going to have your DB shadow them, even if they cross the formation or you cross the center. You know, that's usually a challenge too because they'll change the strength and the weakness. So you could do it, but it's something that you really Texas doesn't do that at all. That's not something they do. Now they could break tendency and do it, but I don't know if you have a cover guy that is going to make that big of a difference to shut down one of their receivers. Do we have a shutdown corner on the team? There's no shutdown corner. So I just think Texas will probably stick with playing more balanced and allowing Jahdae Barron and allowing their safeties to be malleable, and they'll adjust to the formations, they'll adjust to the bunt sets, they'll adjust to all the movement and the pre-snap motions and shifts. But you're right. I mean, that's you could do that. Like I said, that's what Dion used to do, right? They put Dion on the second best receiver sometimes and double Jerry Rice. Like you could do that, but Texas, like I said, Texas doesn't play a lot of shadow man, which is when you're basically going to shadow that guy all across the field. Jalen Ramsey does it now in the league. I mean, Stephon Gilmore has done it with the Cowboys. You'll see teams do it, but I don't know if Texas has that guy that makes it worth it.
Yeah, I think real quick, this has got to be a game Jahdae Barron steps up big in. And we know how impactful he is around the football, but in coverage specifically, because he got picked on against Oklahoma State. I think that was a part of their game plan coming in was to target 23. That's something that I think has to be at the focal point of Jahdae Barron's game and approach coming into this game. You look back at Alabama, there was a little bit of a deep threat on him as well. Isaiah Bond got him twice. So Jahdae Barron, I think specifically because we know how good he is diagnosing plays in front of him, when he's forced to turn around and chase after a guy going down the field, how well is he going to be able to perform and really create, I don't want to call it a mismatch, but alleviate what otherwise would be a stressful situation for Texas defensively tonight against Washington. I look for Jahdae Barron as an under the radar kind of position of importance. Like that has to be a spot for Texas that they win. They cannot allow that star nickel spot to be a spot of weakness tonight.
That's a point. That's a great point, CJ, because the argument can be made that Jahdae Barron had his worst game of the season versus Oklahoma State. And the way they picked on him was actually brilliant. Mike Gunn is just a damn good coach. It was a brilliant way they picked on him. Essentially, they put out counter clues. Like he's a guy, he's a great football investigator, as I call guys. He diagnoses clues really well, which is why he pounces on wide receiver screens. He pounces on underneath routes. They never get that stuff on him because he's reading 3-step. He's reading the body language of the wide receiver, down, distance, alignment. He's great at that stuff. So what you do is use that against him. He's so assignment sound. We're gonna use that against him. So they went out and ups on him. Double moves on him. They just start block and go on him. The same thing TCU did on him. Those things work well because he's so great at reading clues and he has no fear and there is no hesitation. When he sees it, he's gone. Okay, then give it to him like red meat. Show it to him. Show him what he wants to see. Once he goes. Boom, we're going to use it against him. So I wonder if now I'm sure he's watched film. This guy wants to be a defensive coordinator, right? He's watched film on himself and he's probably corrected that. That's all technique. All right, that's all you as a player having better technique and fundamentals that will guard against the out and up, the double moves, the counter clues. when they're trying to mix up a football investigator like Jayden Barron. And it took 12 games of a sample size for teams to figure out, all right, this is how we got to attack them. This is the way to do it. And I've been saying that for a while, and I'm surprised it took teams this long to get him. The best way is double moves out and up because he's so aggressive, and he's always going to attack what he sees first. That makes him a great player, but also you can use anybody's skill set against him. So that's nothing personal to get to him. That just shows you that teams they've been looking for ways to attack the Texas defense, and there's only like 2 or 3 ways to do it. There ain't a lot of ways to attack the Texas defense, and they found another one with Jayden Barron. But like I said, it's tough. It ain't easy. That's maybe an outlier too. I think he will correct that.
All right, we got a couple more questions here we want to get to before we go to the first hour total in. It's around 11:10 a.m. You know what that means? That's about, 8 hours from kickoff here. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
I go to this one. This is a question that I think deserves a full answer. If college football was to move some dates around on the college football calendar, how would that affect Texas in maybe getting more aggressive in recruiting if they moved early signing day to like August from December, as well as possible portal dates? And then he says, Texas 35, Washington 23. Thanks, KD 35. I'm the best. My question is this, listening to Sark yesterday at his press conference, can you imagine if Texas would have had to play a game on December 20th? That was National Signing Day. With this new 12-game playoff, you're talking about moving up 2 weeks worth of games. That would be phenomenal for these coaches to have to worry about that while recruiting was going on. And Sark talked about it. He has to talk to every player on his team after the final regular season game just to make sure they don't want to go into the portal and give them a plan for their future. The amount of stuff that's going on in December for college football, just adding to that with the new playoff rule where you're going to add 8 teams playing 2 weeks early. I don't know what they need to do. I don't know if it's an early signing day. I don't know if it's just like an early December signing day maybe as opposed to a late December signing day. I don't know what they do. Go back to just February.
I actually thought it was interesting that Sarkisian said, I think prior to Christmas, or it might have been during his National Signing Day press conference, he said, let's get a signing day in August. We lock up most of these kids in June. Let's lock them in for sure. Let's not have to worry about them for the duration of the season and obviously into the college football playoff. That opens up a whole lot more of time to focus on the product on the field. The issue with that, you ink your NLI in August, and that coach isn't there by December. What then happens? There's a lot of hoops and hurdles you got to get through if that's going to be the path. But I think Sarkisian behind the scenes is one of those guys that really, really wants to get recruiting out of the way early, not have to deal with it, and obviously with the 12-team playoff coming, there's going to be a lot of focus on just what that playoff entails, and you can almost bet Texas is going to be a contender for that moving forward.
Yeah, I think that look, Texas has to figure it out, and college football has to figure it out.
Absolutely.
That's the piece. If Texas is going to be successful, though, and be in the college football playoff with any regularity, it's going to perhaps impact those teams more frequently than others, and that's really what the discussion is there. Jesse, first stop to refuel. Got 4 hours to go. Hopefully, I make it to Manning's. He's on his way right now.
Be safe on that road, brother.
Hey, CJ, we're going to let you go rest. We're going to take 30-minute breaks. You can go and have a little bite to eat, get some coffee, whatever you want to do, buddy.
Love it.
And we'll see you here on the flip side in a second, okay?
See you all in a bit.
All right, it'll be Rod and I here for a little bit as of now. Hey, Rod, as we talk a little bit more about this game, I want to show you something that I know you'll appreciate.
Yes.
You see this right here, Rod?
What is that?
That is the silver coin that they flip at midfield for the game toss. So it's not the only one, but I think they make a limited run of 50 to 100. Our friend Rick Vasquez at Surly Horns, he got Jonathan Brooks to sign it and put it on display for today. They're going to auction stuff off later today for Texas fans. We got like 4 or 5 signed footballs up here, all kinds of stuff, all of it to benefit Texas One Fund, Jonathan Brooks, et cetera, as well. So we're excited about that.
So cool.
We're live at Manning's. This broadcast, the second hour, being brought to you by Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm. If you've been injured in a car wreck or on the job, you want to get in touch with Adam because he's the guy you want to talk to for a free consultation in your of any site. If you've been injured on the job, LowyLawFirm.com. That's LowyLawFirm.com. Adam and his group, just tremendous to work with for us in 2023, and we're carrying forward to 2024 with him as well. All right, we've got other questions in the chat, Rod, that we can get to. This one I want to go to from Wayne Watson. We've talked about Derek Williams being out for the first half. How important is it to go into the half with minimal one-score differential for Texas? I think it's important for both teams, actually. You don't want to play 10 points behind at half right now, even with Williams in or out. I think that's the key.
With both of these teams being so well, actually, that's the challenge, right? Both of these teams are prolific offensively. They can score quickly if they need to. I don't think this game is going to get. I guess it could get to a two score game if it's maybe a 10 points touchdown to field goal. I don't think it'll get much more. I don't think you'll get a much more lopsided game than that. But if there's a quick start by one team, say there's a turnover early by another team, special teams mishap or miscue, that could change obviously that outcome. But I think this game will stay pretty close most of the game. And I think if there's a team that may have to play catch up, it'll happen before they get to the half because they understand, just like Wayne's mentioning here, you don't want to go into the half down by double digits. And especially considering I don't know how the coin toss is going to go. You just brought the coin toss. If the other team getting the ball with the lead is getting the ball after half, which could totally flip the entire game. So I think that sense of urgency, you'll see both coaches coach to that sense of urgency. We talk about this all the time in the Texas OU game, right? That the momentum shifts are palpable. You can feel them. You can feel them happening when like real time. Remember that when Sark is up his first year Texas OU game, he's up 28 points or whatever it is, and Caleb Williams takes that fourth down run 60 something yards for a touchdown, and it almost like the wind shifted. You could feel it. And that happens all the time in the Texas OU game. Trust me, I was a part of it. Had a pick six in that game, shifted all the momentum. We went up double digits, and then they snatched the momentum right back with a kickoff return that got deep into our territory the next play. All right, so I think very much like that Texas OU game, you're going to see momentum shifts that are really, really just I think they're really potentially dangerous. Like landslide dangerous in this game. And I think the coaches understand that because both of these offenses are so high powered, they want to guard against it. So if you do see a team getting a lot of the momentum, I can see the opposing team doing something drastic, like a trick play, or like we saw in the Texas OU game this year, right? Like a special teams trick play or something, or going for it on fourth down, trying to snatch that momentum back so that they're not on the opposing end of a landslide, you know what I mean, in this game, because I think it could happen, but I think both of the coaches are too good for that. They'll coach their way out of it. They won't allow that to happen. I think Kalen DeBoer's group is too good for it. I think Texas coaches are too good to allow that to happen.
And I think both offenses can make plays quickly.
Yes.
They have the guys to get back into games when maybe you think it's getting away from you. I just hope that Texas, if the Longhorns do get out in front early, I hope we see a little bit of the Oklahoma State and Texas Tech in them, where they keep their foot on the gas, right? It truly is all gas, no brakes.
Yeah.
That's been a concern of mine. But, I feel like they've turned the corner in that regard, Rod. I feel like the last couple of games, they felt like that. Ever since that TCU completed pass to Adonai Mitchell, Texas has played a brand of ball, in my opinion, that's as good as anybody in the country. And, big lead, small lead, it doesn't matter. You got to play. You've been talking about it. You got to play to a standard and not just to beat the other team. And Texas in the last couple of games has played to a standard. And that's where I think things get really, really interesting for the Longhorns and as they're doing it each and every day. All right, I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Rod Babers. You're listening to On Texas Football. We're here live at Manning's. I got to say this. Texas! 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 All right, we're getting it going here. Now everybody's ready. Happy. Oh, wait.
To my ears.
There we go. That's where it's at right now, Rod. I got some other things to discuss for everybody. I wrote this down and wanted to go over it and just see what your thoughts were about it. The Washington offensive line is really good in pass protection.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think Texas comes out tonight in that regard? Do they put pressure on Penix consistently or enough to make a difference in this game? Or is Washington and their passing attack just so prolific in getting the ball out earlier that Sweat, Murphy, Collins, Burke, Sorrell just don't have the time to get there? What do you think?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because the offensive line, and they are a really good O-line, the Joe Moore Award winning offensive line, Washington. I heard Chris Peterson talking about this. They may be the best pass protection offensive line in the country, but it's not all on the players on the O-line and their unit. A lot of it is Michael Penix and his ability to get rid of the football. He's been under pressure. He's been under duress. Guys, he is great at getting rid of the football. I'll give you a couple of stats about Michael Penix. So you look at sack rate versus the blitz, highest percentage of dropbacks versus the blitz resulting in a sack. He's at 3.1% percentage of dropbacks versus the blitz that result in a sack. Quinn Ewers is damn near at 7%. So he's elite in that category. If you look at pressure that ends up resulting in a sack for Michael Penix, if you look at pressures, he's at his sack rate versus pressure 9.4%. And Quinn's at close to 30%. All right. I mean, nobody's even close to single digits. None of these quarterbacks in the Final Four are close to single digits. It's him. He's got a unique ability with his comfort in this system to get rid of the football quickly and at the right time. He's mobile enough to work around in the pocket. Now he doesn't want to run and he doesn't want to scramble. When he's extending the play and moving, he's doing it to look downfield and throw. It's still worth it to blitz, even if you can't necessarily get to him, because I think it's worth to flush him from the pocket. I would blitz. I would blitz from the interior and from the perimeter. You got to do both. He's such a high level passer. He can't not know what you're doing from play to play. So you can't consistently do the same thing over and over and over again. But I would double down on the interior pressure. From what I've seen, that's the most effective pressure against him because it forces him to abandon the pocket. And when he's outside the pocket, completion percentage drops to 47%. That's 84th among the FBS quarterbacks. And when he's blitzed, 59% completion percentage. That's 53rd in the country among quarterbacks. You can at least make him erratic. Will you get to him? Will you sack him? I honestly, based on the stats and analytics, probably not. You had eight quarterback hurries last year. That was it. You really didn't touch that guy. But I don't think Texas was aggressive enough going after him last season. I think this season they will. They do have a better interior defensive line in terms of being able to rush the passer. I think PK will blitz them. I think that'll be one of the biggest differences. Texas doesn't blitz a lot, by the way. Texas blitz rate, they're 73rd highest blitz rate in college football, like at 35%. They don't blitz a lot. I bet in this game, whether you're talking about interior blitzes from the second level or blitzes from the edge, I bet that number jumps to over 40, close to 45%. I would increase it close to 50%. I'd throw a lot of blitzes at this guy. Your DBs are going to be on islands anyway a lot of the time. I would blitz him to force him to get to abandon the pocket and get rid of the football even quicker than he wants to. And maybe you stand a better chance on money downs. And this might be happening on money downs specifically. It's got to happen on predictable passing downs where they're going to throw the football. If they're throwing on early downs and non-standard downs, basically, that's a whole nother discussion that we're having in terms of PK being able to adjust to that.
Kevin Jones asked a good question here. Is there a way to force Penix more to his right as opposed to being able to scramble left? He's a natural left-hander, obviously, so it makes it easier for him not to have to throw against his body. Is there a way to try to flush him right instead of left?
Yeah, you can overload a side. You can blitz from one. You can almost force him to abandon the pocket to a certain side if you want to. They'll make their adjustment. By the way, they like to move the pocket. They move the pocket a lot naturally. They probably move the pocket a quarter of the time, maybe 20% of the time. They're rolling him either way. If you can time out when you're going to blitz or when you're going to overload that edge, force him to his right with them rolling the pocket, that could be a problem. But if you can catch him by surprise, timing it out, I agree with you. I think that could be I think you're going to have to use some of those tactics. I said Anthony Hill would be big in this game. I know they're really good at their tackle position. Fawutanu has allowed 2 sacks this season. I believe Rosengarten is the other tackle. He's allowed 0 sacks this season. Those guys are really good. I think you could have some success as a speed edge rusher against Fawutanu. He's an NFL guy, but Anthony Hill's got next level athleticism coming off the edge. If I'm Texas, every now and then I would try to get Fawutanu in space. He's allowed 2 quarterback hits. He's allowed 19 pressures on the season. That's the most pressures of any of the offensive linemen. On the edge, strangely enough, I think Rosengarten actually has been more consistent in pass protection. He's only allowed 10 pressures, 0 sacks, 2 quarterback hits. That guy's been really consistent. If I'm going to go after, I know it sounds crazy, I'd probably go after the left tackle. Like I said, both NFL guys, but left tackle was allowed almost twice as many pressures, twice as many, 2 sacks to 0, and the same amount of QB hits. That's the guy you'd probably try to match Anthony Hill up on if you're coming off the edge.
All right, we got one more question here coming in from Lane Seawright. Did the coaches come to an agreement on headsets in this game? If so, how much of an effect will it have on play calling? It's our understanding that is not – they can't do it in the college football playoff. They can only do it for regular bowl games this year. So Texas and Sark and Kellen DeBoer didn't even have that conversation, is my understanding. Now, you can do it for every other bowl game where they're going to this is to counteract all the sign stealing, by the way, that we talked about before. But, Lane, it's my understanding they can't even be a part of that. They have to use regular rules during the college football playoffs. Jim Harbaugh may be the happiest about that, I guess.
Hey, Bobby, did you hear the story about Nick Saban, though, and his staff? How Nick Saban basically told his players to not watch film on their iPads, on any iPads or any of those devices, because there's a possibility they could have been hacked. So now they're watching film old school way, and they watched film together in a film room, basically old school, because they're worried about being hacked. Man, the athletic espionage is going to another level. If that is the case, I mean, that's a real story that's out there. By the way, Nick Saban does have a member of the Michigan coaching staff now currently on his coaching staff. He hired him basically when I think within the same week that they had announced that they were going to the college football playoff. He hired a former Michigan coach who was on that staff this year and last year. Saban is just the GOAT's always 3 steps ahead.
He's got no shame. I mean, absolute zero.
None.
Sign me up. That's where he's at. Tremendous coach, tremendous tenure thus far at Alabama. I hope there's a rematch next week. That's all I'll say. All right, this is from Kyle Bohack. And, Rod, I really love it when you go and talk about this kind of stuff. And I think some fans that enjoy the intricacies of football enjoy how you discuss this. I think Sark mixes in some heavy packages, Kyle says. Definitely 2 tight ends, but maybe even 3. Ogbo, Sanders, and Helm. Ooh. I don't know if Washington has the beef to handle that type of run game. they may not have the beef, but they'll try to just bog it down, right?
Yeah.
And Texas into third downs and try to win that way. What do you think about a possible 3 tight end look, a 13 personnel type of package?
I could see that in the red zone. I've actually brought that up myself early in the season. Like, hey, in the red zone, you could double down on some of those heavy packages, go 13 personnel, and then throw the football out of it, right? Find some matchup advantages. I agree with their heavy sets, not extreme heavy, maybe not the 3 tight end sets, but going heavier with more 12 personnel or more pony package, which Sark has been he's been leaning more towards post Bijan and Rojo, and I'm glad he is, because Texas is great running the football and throwing the football, actually more successful throwing the football out of their 2 tailback sets. Now, last time they played Washington in the Alamo Bowl, Sark upset me because I think it was a lazy game plan, and the reason I described it as lazy was because there were no 2 tailback sets, all right, no pony packages, there were no 6 O-line packages the last time they played in the Alamo Bowl. What's up with that? All right. Well, I mean, come on. I think it helps the innovation and creativity, especially in the run game, when you throw different personnel groupings and you throw different challenges, different problems for the defense to solve. An extra offensive lineman does that. Hell, if you got a problem blocking Braylon Trice, which, by the way, last year, Braylon Trice went off. 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss. It was the best performance by an elite defensive end against Texas all season long, even though he had faced 4 first-round defensive ends that same season. All right, this guy's legit. Led the college football in pressures last season and this season with 7 each time. Why not put an extra offensive lineman out there? Force him to run all the way around. Put 2 guys on him. They never tried that. Maybe this year, if he's going off, that's something you try. And they actually throw the ball really well out of the 6-0 line package. I'll give you those numbers a little bit later on. But the pony package, the 2 tailback sets, even though Sark said last season we would see all 3 running backs, we didn't. Jay Brooks was hurt. We didn't know that until the game. So he was dealing with, I think, a bit of a pitch count. But there was no Jaden Blue in that game at all. And I thought we'd see Jaden Blue. Keelan Robinson was the workhorse running back, which I think we all agree, looking back now, that was a miscalculation by Sark. And then the running game had no innovation, no creativity. Even though pony package, this year, 2 tailback sets, you're averaging your highest yards per attempt, highest yards per play, and your highest completion percentage and yards per rush, by the way, out of any personnel grouping. Out of any personnel grouping, it is your highest yards per rush, yards per attempt, and yards per play. And I think Sark should use it in this matchup too. So I'm with you. Heavier sets, but 1 back, 2 tight ends, 2 backs, 1 tight end, and some 6-0 line package. If I don't see it, it'd be upsetting because last year, I thought the game plan was a little lazy because you didn't see the diversity, the variety that usually comes from a Sark game plan. Like where's that? So I hope you'll see it you'll see it in this matchup, I guarantee.
Well, we know we need to see something different, and they've got to establish the run. Texas does. Whether they start with the run or start with the pass, they've got to find a way there to make that a reality, because Texas cannot just try to pass against a Washington team. There's some validity to that, but they've got to at least be able to run the ball late in the game.
Yep.
To try to be able to put them away and or take the lead, however it may be. I feel like the big packages or the odd sets, that's kind of interesting to me. The flip side of this is what we expect from Washington, Rod. Mm-hmm. And watching Joey Galloway, I think 2 days ago on Sports Center, their trips package, Washington, looks darn near unstoppable. Yeah, I mean, it really does. What did you take away from that kind of discussion that Galloway had, as well as what you've thought and seen on your film evaluation?
Well, 3x1 sets in general just allow you to isolate, right? You can isolate guys. First of all, it's very similar to what teams are doing with some of the empty sets as well. But 3x1 sets, depending on who you put as your single wide receiver over there, oftentimes you can get isolation. All right, you can just get man to man. You can create that one-on-one, which all coaches are trying to do. You create that one-on-one there. You also can force them to isolate some of their weakest coverage defenders on that number 3 receiver. You count from the outside in, number 1, number 2, number 3. So on that trip side, usually on that number 3 receiver, that's there's going to be a matchup advantage. And sometimes even Sark puts Xavier Worthy there. You'll put Xavier Worthy at that number 3 spot, and that usually is a safety. Your nickel ends up usually lined up on that number 2 receiver, all right? And then you end up with a safety lined up, isolated on that number 3 receiver, and you got a safety matched up against, one of your best receivers. That's usually easy money all day, every day. So that's what 3x1 sets do real easy. Or teams decide it's a numbers game. So you can either double that. Say I put X man over there. I put my best receiver on the number 1 side, it's a single receiver. Well, you can double that guy, give that guy help, but then that means I win the numbers advantage on the trip side most of the time. If that's the case, if you're devoting resources to stop the single receiver. But if you're leaving that single receiver in man-to-man and you're not going to give that guy help, then you can win or match the numbers advantage on the trip side. And if you do that, then I'll just take the single receiver side. So football at its most rudimentary point is just a numbers game. You're just trying to outnumber. If you don't have the numbers advantage inside, then you got the numbers advantage outside. That's why it's only 11. If you got the numbers advantage outside, then you don't have it inside. You can only win the numbers advantage inside or outside. You can't win them both. Now, Tavondre Sweat, he's a cheat code, right? Because he takes up two offensive linemen. That's why you want a war daddy down there. Well, if he takes up 2 offensive linemen, then I can win the numbers advantage again. Then it can flip back in my favor because I got 1 taking up your 2. So it's that essentially what the 3x1 set does. It's a numbers game, and it's easy for the defense. Defense has to show because they're so stressed. They have to show whether they're helping that single receiver or if they're leaving that guy one-on-one, because they don't, especially when you combine them with bunch formations. If I talked about closely clustered groups of receivers, then the DBs are even under more stress. Then they have to get to their alignment and assignment, therefore abandoning their shell coverage. We talked about this, and that's why the 3-1-1 sets with Washington is elite, because they got 3 NFL caliber wide receivers.
How many times do you think we'll see that from them tonight? Like 10 times, 15 times, 20?
Yeah, I would say probably 12 to 15 times. You're going to see. Hell, it could even be. They could up it even more. I didn't keep up with 3x1 sets when I tracked Washington. I kept up with more like just bunch formation, things of that nature. But I mean, you're right. They run a lot of it. They I couldn't give you the exact number, but eye test wise, you're gonna see a lot of 3x1. And against Texas, it's easy because you're isolating the safeties. And that's what 3x1 sets allow you to do. Like I said, that number 3 coverage defender, or at least that defender in coverage on that number 3 wide receiver, usually going to be a safety. And with Derek Williams out, you're down your best coverage safety. So that's either going to be Jaron Thompson, that's going to be Taft Daddy, all right, or it's going to be Keaton Crawford. And either way, if you're Washington, you got the matchup you want. I got a number 3, and whoever they can put Romeo Doomsday at that number 3 wide receiver. And in Texas, they're not going to structurally change their defense. So that's probably going to be a safety matched up on Romeo Doomsday all day, every day, and twice on Sunday. They're going to take that. Or I want a freshman corner, Malik Muhammad, lined up on Romeo Doomsday. I could do that too. Because I can go 3x1 with him as a single wide receiver and guarantee that Malik Muhammad, whether you go cover 4 or whether you're going cover 1, going to be isolated on the best wide receiver. And depending on how much stress I put on you formationally, I could widen that out and force your safeties to almost abandon that guy on an island. The 3x1 is it's a beast. It is. Unless you have a shutdown corner, that's the only way to save you. You're saving grace against 3x1, because then you trust I can leave my corner out there on an island. I don't need to help him at all, or I can leave him on an island on the number 1 receiver on the trip side, and I can zone. I can bracket. I can zone up that number 2 and number 3 on the trip side. Oh, I can move around my shutdown. That's what we were talking about earlier when the person in the chat brought up that what Belichick would do. That's what because Belichick always got a shutdown corner. He always got one. He's like, now I'm moving that guy around. So Texas don't have that. They will in the future, I think, have that, but they don't have that right now. So that's why the 3x1 sets will haunt you as a DC.
Got it. All right, Rod. This next segment, I want to talk about this. Chris Bennett asked, who is for Texas? No one is talking that will make an impact. Before I ask you that question, I asked a couple of people here in the audience. They were thank you for the folks that responded to this. From Dustin, He said Alfred Collins. Christian said Ethan Burke. Tommy went with Jaron Thompson. And Tom went with Savion Red. Any of those guys hit a nerve with you?
That's good. The Savion Redwood came out of nowhere. Maybe that red cat comes back, huh? That red cat comes back a little bit in short yardage. That's good. Good question, CB. CB's, I love me some CB, man. He's good people. Yeah, somebody's not making it. Nobody, we're not talking about it all. I'm trying to think of somebody we have not mentioned at all making an impact in this game. Could it be Keelan Robinson? Should I mention Keelan Robinson? Kick returns. I know you kick returns. I talked about the pony package. Usually it's him involved with some type of Sark special in that pony package. Will he dial something up for Keelan Robinson? They like Keelan Robinson. They like his attitude. They like the fact that, he seems like an unselfish guy. Oh, that's a good one too, Brian. I like that. I like that Jay Witt one. I want to say that you brought up Jay Witt, though, Bobby. You brought up Jay Witt earlier this week about being a guy that makes a big impact. Yeah, Keelan Robinson, we wanted. I like the Mo Blackwell one, too. And Mo Blackwell package could be interesting in this game in the right situation because you have multiple hybrids who can blitz from the edge, that you can move around, maybe blitzing until you have Jalen Ford, but you have you'd have Mo Blackwell, and you'd also have Anthony Hill. You can move those guys around, maybe confuse some blocking schemes. And Blackwell package is something to keep your eye on potentially, because that's the key, I think, to forcing Michael Penix to turn the football over too. He only had one turnover last year. Go back and watch the play. CJ remembers it. They're moving and shifting. It's a kind of a ghost front, amoeba front, moving and shifting the defensive line, and Penix has no idea what the hell is going on. But you can tell he makes the throw, trusting my receiver is going to be there where he's supposed to be, and the receiver wasn't there. Nobody was there. I've seen that happen at least twice a game with Michael Penix. I swear, where he throws it, he's like, my guy's supposed to be there. And sometimes it's him. He's like, actually, I messed up. Then sometimes it's on the receiver and they're just off in timing. But that's how dialed in and that's his comfort level within the offense. That's why it's so hard to sack him, because he's all about where this guy's supposed to be there. I'm throwing it. He's supposed to be there. I'm trusting the system. And he has a really high level of trust in his wide receivers, in the system, and in his arm. All of them. And I think sometimes that works against him a little bit too. So, but I think, honestly, that's a good discussion on who's going to be that kind of player. Terrence Brooks could have been that guy last year. Could have had that pick six. Should have had
I
that
would
pick.
add one more to this. I like the Alfred Collins pick from Dustin, because that might be a guy that can get pressure that we haven't been talking. We've been talking so much about Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. And if they play the four big defensive linemen alignment, maybe Alfred Collins becomes a bigger piece of that. What do you think of that? You think that's possible?
I agree with that, because I do think, and we've talked about it strategically, schematically, Texas, I think, is going to have to win with light boxes at times. And lighter box essentially is having fewer defenders than the opposing team has blockers. Some people put the number on it, 6 or fewer defenders in the box is a light box. But I think for Texas, winning with a light box is going to be key, because I do believe they're going to want to devote an extra defender to stopping the deep ball. Usually try to play with 2 high shell coverages, 2 high deep safeties. And if they do rotate to a single high, it'll be a late rotation to bring that safety into the box to help. So I think initially stopping the run with a light box, which Texas can do. They're one of the best teams in the best defense in the country at stopping the run with the light box, because you got Tavondre Sweat and a Byron Murphy and a Jaylen Ford. You've got a really good front seven. So they, depending on what Washington is doing and how they're trying to stress this defense, if it is vertically like it was last season, and by the way, they only completed 1 of those 10 deep balls last year of 20-plus yards, the light box will be key. And like you said, maybe you want to go big on the D-line if you're going with a light box to bring more girth, more size.
Well, before we get to this next one, Washington is now up 14-0 on LSU. LSU's defense just not very good. Let's just put it that way. All right, hey, Rod, we've got a special guest, first one of the day, Bob Ballou, a friend of mine that I've known for Before I knew him
What's
before
up,
he had gray hair. Hey, Bob covers the Longhorns, sports guy at CBS in Austin. You've been here from the very start, Bob. Welcome to the show. I got to say this. You and I, on the Friday night in Tuscaloosa, before that game, you and I were on the Walk of Champions. We had to sit down and talk. We're like, what's going on? What do we think? Maybe this is year. Maybe it's not. Here we are 3 months later. What do you think?
First of all, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. It's really funny because before this year started, I'll say this because I think when you're wrong, you need to admit you're wrong too. Yeah. Last year, I said Texas was going to win the Big 12. I thought the amount of talent and Sark's mind would all work. It took an extra year. But going into this year, you just felt like it's all too much talent, Sark's mind, all the things are finally going to come together. And we were in Tuscaloosa, and I had said that week, I said Texas will beat Alabama by double digits. And everybody looked at me like I was crazy. But I think seeing what Alabama was at the time and knowing what Texas could be, it felt like, okay, if they get into the game and they have an opportunity, they couldn't finish in 22, this is going to be their first chance to finish. And when they ran it down their throat in the fourth quarter, that was like nothing we've seen in a long, long time. And that was the moment that I think everyone went, yeah, this could be special.
Well, it brings back something mentioned in the chat earlier. Like Texas is a physical team on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
They were physical in that Alabama game. And that was different than what we had seen, I don't know, last 10, 15 years. I mean, what's it been?
They were physical in 09, but I think 08.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think that 08 team was – I was talking to Quan Cosby about this last night, how almost comparable the 08 and 23 teams are. Like, I wish that 08 team had gotten the chance to play in a playoff or play – I don't know if they would have beaten Florida. Florida was awesome that year. But that team was so good. And I look at this team the same way. And Sark kind of mentioned this yesterday. It's something I've been saying for the last month. They need to win it now because you don't know if you're ever going to get this chance again. I mean, you feel like you will. But this team is so special with the seniors, the leadership they provided, mixed in with this young group of up-and-coming freshmen that are awesome. I mean, think about the freshmen that are contributing on this 12-1 team. I mean, it goes from what Anthony Hill's become, Malik Muhammad, Derek Williams, obviously, and then CJ Baxter. It's just been so impressive to see those guys bring them on. And a little quick story I'm sure y'all have told, but talking to Jordan Whittington the other day, I said, why did you give CJ Baxter that number? And he was like, everybody knew him as C4, and I felt like it's fine. He can have it. The number doesn't mean that much to me. But then he said, that was my first act of real leadership this year. And I really felt like that's when I could become a leader on this team. And I think there's so many stories of like that with the senior group of guys that have taken these young guys under their wing and shown them the right way to do it, show them the Sark way to do it. That's what's made this really special.
I think that goes to culture,
100%.
right? The leaders leading the way they're supposed to. Yeah. Rod, you have something for Bob?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask him about the culture. I mean, Sark emphasizes it a lot, talks about it a lot. It's a term that is thrown around probably too loosely these days in sports, but it seems like it has a heavier meaning, a deeper meaning at Texas. And what examples have you seen? You see this team a lot. What examples have you seen behind the scenes and obviously on the field that to you exhibit that football culture that Sark keeps talking about?
You know, I think the funny thing about that, Rod, think about let's say the Charlie Strong years when they would come out in the fall or spring or whatever we talked to them, and they would say, we're just so much closer this year. We played ping pong together. Ping pong was always the big thing. Shane Buechele was the best ping pong player. Yeah. And I feel like those guys probably thought it was good. But the Jordan Whittington example, I think, is a great one. I think Christian Jones has taken those young offensive linemen under his wing and said, Kelvin Banks is awesome. Came in from day one and was awesome, but he still had a lot to learn. And so when you get a guy like a Christian Jones, who's number one, an awesome kid, I mean, just the best. And that starts trickling down, and other guys see that. I think Jaylen Ford's done that to the best of his ability with Anthony Hill, trying to maybe calm him down a little bit, maybe like settle him in a little bit. But it really has been across the board. And as much as everybody probably rolls their eyes because Sark brings it up all the time and it's culture this, culture that, the Culture Wednesdays that started after year one in that summer, they went through that whole summer. They did the Culture Wednesdays or whatever. So at the end of that year, Sark says, what do you guys want more of? Like in their exit interviews or whatever. What do you got more of? What do you want less of? And they said, we want more culture. And so they start Culture Fridays. And on Fridays, these guys come in and write notes to each other that night and hand it to them and say, here's what I appreciate you. Here's why I like you. Here's what you've done for me. Here's why I think you're a special person. And they want that. And I don't think that's the case with a lot of teams. I don't think teams really buy in. Sark used the example this week. Every time I've gone to the hospitality room at night, our whole team is in there together doing things. Yeah. And I think that's the buy-in. And as much as you can say, we played ping pong over the summer, we're all really close. And I'm sure those guys all like each other. But it's the culture plus talent equals something special. That's what they talked about a lot. I think that's the case. That's where they are right now.
I was talking to Mike Gooseby. Mike's the dad of Trevor Gooseby. Yeah. And I felt like this was indicative of it's not just the seniors doing this. Mm-hmm. Mike told me that Kelvin Banks, who is the first string left tackle, he's only a sophomore, has kind of taken Trevor Gooseby into that same kind of thought process. And that means that it's not just going to be the seniors are one and done and gone. There's a group of them coming after that can carry it on.
And you've got to have those guys that step into that role, and you start looking for it, because last year it was Bijan and Roshan and Demo. And it's not to say there weren't other leaders, but those were the three guys that everybody looked to. Now you turn and you start seeing it at every position. There's a guy. There's Tavondre and Byron Murphy. And then they start teaching the guys that are below them. It's Jaylen Ford teaching Anthony Hill. It's, Jade and Jaron Thompson and Michael Taff bringing it to Malik Murphy and Derek Williams and those guys. And it just trickles down. And that's when your program, in my mind, it's when you have the depth, that's when your program takes off, obviously. But when you have the depth of leadership, it can go to a new height.
All right, Bob Ballou, thank you, my man. I know you got to give it work.
I don't ever. Come on, we got a 40-minute special tonight, and it's a lot of fun from the field getting to do that. It's gonna be a blast. Can I give you a prediction? Can we at least?
Yes, he has to give a prediction before they leave.
I think Texas is the best team in the playoff. The fun thing about this is it's not a knock on Washington, and I think everybody uses some kind of motivation in whatever way they want to use it. The whole Washington's an underdog thing. I'm going to tell you the same thing I said in Tuscaloosa. I think Texas wins by double digits. I think it's 44-31. I think Washington's given up 30 like 5 or 6 times. Texas has only given it up twice, and that was to K-State at home. They gave up 30, and then obviously OU in the loss 34. Everybody is so worried. My 2 biggest things that I'm most excited about tonight: can Texas stop Dylan Johnson? As much as everybody's worried about Penix and those wide receivers, I want to see him Dylan Johnson's been awesome this year. And I'm so excited to see Sark's play calling. To give that guy 30 days to prepare for a defense that hasn't been elite this year, we're going to see some stuff tonight, I think. It's going to be a lot of fun.
44-31.
44-31. Wow.
You're a braver man than I. If you're in Austin, make sure you guys check out that special tonight. What time does it air?
6:30.
6:30?
6:30 to 7.
All right, that's Bob Ballou, CBS.
Thanks, Bob. You man, brother.
Love you, Rod B.
Love you, brother. Your hair looks great as always.
Thank you.
It's got gray in it now, though. Thanks, Bob. I appreciate you, buddy. Big
Thank
event.
you,
All right, that's going to be the next segment. We're going to bring CJ Vogel back in here. See you, Bob. Thank you, man. Yeah.
Thanks, Bob. Man, 44. 44.
Hey, 44.
I hope he's right. I would love him to be right. Then I can have a stress-free night. I can just have some fun. I won't have those bubble guts we talking about. But I don't know, for some reason. I think I'm gonna be stressful in that.
Texas was losing going into the fourth quarter against Alabama and won by double.
That's true.
You got to remember that. You're
true.
still going to have some bubble guts at some point.
Exactly.
44-31. You ain't got no choice. You care too much to not have for that.
That is fair. That's fair.
Hey, CJ, you're welcome back in. You have anything you want to add or talk about a little bit?
Where were we? I was running around grabbing a bite.
You were trying to get some food in you?
Had to.
Yeah. Rod and I were talking about a number of different things. Bob came in and gave us a wonderful example of culture and what it meant. And he talked about Jordan Whittington giving over the number 4 to CJ Baxter as a example of that.
And you talk about the culture. Jordan Whittington is absolutely the focal point and the probably the best example on this roster right now of just how far this roster or this culture has come. That right there, a guy who's entering his 5th year as a Longhorn, has been around the block for forever. It has Longhorn in his blood since, well, before CJ Baxter even had a Division I offer. That right there is the most selfless kind of approach that you're starting to see with this Texas team right now. And above everything else, I look back and I'm not sure if Bob mentioned this or not, but the culture Wednesdays and Fridays that the Texas team and this staff have implemented now. And Rod, you can probably talk to this a little bit as well, but just being able to not only just play for yourself and the team, but one another. The guy next to you, is someone that is going to go to war for you every single day. A guy that's going to, put his life and body on the line for the sense of being your teammate. And that's something that Texas has really implemented this year. We're starting to see it a lot on the field. It's trickling down into the young guys. And like you said, that example of Jordan Whittington, it's just selfless. And it starts at the top. That's one of those things that when this current freshman class is seniors, I'm not going to say they're all going to be giving up their single-digit numbers to the highly touted, freshmen coming in, but it's that type of stuff you see in the locker room that really starts trickling down into future, generations, if you will, of Texas recruiting cycles. So that I love it. I love every bit of that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think the one thing about Sark's culture, and I think I know the reason he's been so selective in the types of coaches he brings in and the players, right? Even via the transfer portal, the players he recruits, right? I think it was Coach Banks who said, "We're looking for signs." Looking for signs. All right, there's certain signs they're looking for, and he mentioned specifically signs of respect. That you respect the game, you respect your teammates, you respect other coaches, that you respect our program, you respect their culture. And that stood out to me because I kind of harkened back to a quote from a Super Bowl coach who told me, kind of culture is overrated. He said, "I don't worry about coach. I don't have to worry about it because I bring in good people. I'm so selective about the people I bring in. The culture takes care of itself." And I think about what Sark's doing, right? We talked about how selective he's been about the young men that he's bringing into this culture. Because I think he understands how fragile it is. But bringing in the right people, I think he understands I won't have to keep promoting the culture constantly and cultivating it. If I bring in the right people and our leadership on the team, they're passing down right, that culture to the young guys. I don't have to keep repeating it. I don't have to keep cultivating it. I don't have to, grow it from, basically from nothing each and every season if I bring in the right people. But if I don't, and I'm just bringing in talent instead of bringing in the right type of talent so that we can cultivate this team, then yeah, maybe every year I gotta, kind of recalibrate. I have to or try to grow it again. I have to really be deliberate and be intentional about the culture. I think he wants to get to a point where he doesn't have to emphasize the culture as much. That's why we're getting overemphasis now. Because at one point this thing is going, it don't get on cruise control, but there'll be so many different pieces in place to help him kind of promote and keep the culture going in the right direction. Right now, I think he's just trying to make sure that it doesn't get derailed, because it could, right? You just established a really positive culture. Guys, last year, the culture wasn't totally where he wants it to be. It just got there. And it could just as easily get derailed or go off the rails. He doesn't want that to happen. That's why he's so deliberate about it. And I think it's the right move. Bringing in the right people. It can't be everybody. Everybody can't be a part of it because they don't have the right disposition and personality and football character.
I love it because repeatable, sustained success. That's what we're after. We want to be here next year, the year after, not just this year. So the Kelvin Banks of the world making themselves available and really going over and working with a young Trevor Gooseby or Jaden Chadman, that's just going to pay dividends down the road. That's how it all works. All right, I'm going to take a break personally. I'm going to hand it off to you and CJ, Rod. You guys carry it for about 15, 30 minutes, and I'll be back in a little bit. We got some more guests ahead, by the way, and we'll be talking to them.
Sound good? Thanks, Bobby.
Get some food.
All right, see you guys. Yep.
Thanks, Bobby. All right,
Bro,
CJ.
I wanted to touch back on that culture because you're starting to see it kind of trickle down a little bit. Remember when Texas had kids leaving the field at halftime of games? Just taking themselves off the field, not wanting to be a part of not only the game itself, but the team and the program at the time. That's not there. But you made a great point. We're hearing so much about the culture because for however long it wasn't there. There was nothing that Texas fans could point to in that locker room and say, those guys got it going on. What's inside the walls of Moncrief and inside that locker room, that's something I could be excited about. I can be prideful about the way that this team plays. I don't think that culture was necessarily implemented at the time. Now we're starting to see it, and it's the first time in a while, so you're going to hear about it often. The next time you start hearing about culture, now that this is the standard, is when things might start going a little awry, because this is the way it will be. And in the media world, what's going to drive clicks? It's new storylines. If we continue to pound you about the culture and how consistent it has been, that's not going to necessarily be the case for us to make a fun, compelling storyline for everybody else. But it is very impressive what has happened in 3 years under Sarkisian, and it will remain. And I think that above anything else is the most exciting part.
Yeah, that's why I think he wants to build it the right way, right? He wants the foundation of this culture to be sustainable, as Bobby mentioned, right? He wants things to have sustained success over time. And I think that's why he's being really selective about who he's bringing into the program. I think one of the other things that has really helped this culture for Sark, and I'll give Sark all the credit for it, is the fact that, the players themselves, they've developed this great character. Honestly, a lot of these guys, because they went through the 5-7 season, they've seen some of the dark times here for Texas football. And honestly, that's what develops character, right? Going through adversity, being able to battle adversity and overcome it. That has been a big part of the growth of this team. And that's being passed down from, the seniors and the older guys, the elder statesmen of the team, down to the younger guys. They don't have to go through that trauma, right, to develop that character. That is something that I think now is being passed down, but also being recruited. Sark has talked about how he likes players from championship level programs. And we know when you're recruiting certain players from California or even from Texas, DFW area, we talked about how advanced these programs are. Those programs weed out and cultivate really good football character. They weed out bad football character, and they promote and cultivate good football character. So when you get a guy from that program, a program like that, they are, give Wesley for an example in Austin, or give, the example of Duncanville and what they're doing in DFW. Those guys already understand. They understand the commitment they understand the dedication it takes. They understand what it takes to win. And what a winning culture is all about. Now, not to the extent of college football in Texas, not to that magnitude, but they do get it, and you almost have a head start. And those guys coming in building a positive football culture. So I think he likes to recruit those kind of guys. I think he likes old souls, as I call them, guys who are from households with other college football players they grew up with, either as siblings or their mom and dad played sports at a high level in college or in the pros. He likes those guys too, because those are old souls. They also understand the dedication, commitment. They usually are from a household that roots out and weeds out bad football character, promotes good sports character, if you will. And I think coaches are trying to, like I said, recruit things they can't coach or develop. Character is one of those things that's really hard to develop. You can, but why go through that when you can just recruit good character and good athletes at the same time?
Yeah, and I think that's part of why we're seeing Sarkisian and his staff be so delicate with how they approach the portal. We saw it in 2021. When Sark first got here, there was not the talent, and I think this is a universal acceptance from Texas fans. The talent in 2021 compared to what it is now on the Texas roster is night and day. In the trenches, at wide receiver, wherever you want to point on the field, it was night and day. Sarkisian knew to win right away, he needed guys that probably now he wouldn't take because of the culture fit, because of, well, they might bring a couple extra bags with them, if you know what I mean. But at the time, I think he took those guys because of the lack of immediate explosive talent on that roster, left him in kind of a bind of I either take them and I roll the dice, or we're going to struggle and be, pretty bad. Unfortunately, it was the worst of both right there. So, but I really like it. And one thing I also want to point out, you talk about culture kind of breeding more culture. Look at what Alabama did when they. There we go. Sorry about it.
Love it.
I've had so many more times throughout the day. I'm really excited.
Hey, you can start it up anytime you want to, CJ. Start it up.
Bobby gets back and get going. I'm looking up. I see Liberty just took a 7-0 lead on Oregon, so pretty impressive stuff. Rod, there's one point I want to talk about the game.
Let's do it.
We talked about it this morning on Coffee and Football. A little bit about, an under the radar kind of, I don't want to say tendency or playmaker, even an X factor. Just a guy on the field that no one's really mentioning, and that's the Washington tight ends. I feel like, it's similar to Texas in the entire approach with Xavier Worthy and Jordan Whittington and A.D. Mitchell. We're hitting it with Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk, and Roma Dunze. Not many people are talking about that, that Washington tight end spot. Texas has been better this year than where they were, obviously, in the past, the tight end passing game. But what's the biggest, I guess, question mark that you see when it comes to Texas, guarding the tight end spot so far this year?
I think the reason, I'm trying to think of what tight end's going off against Texas. Honestly, Jared Wiley actually had a good game against Texas. TCU. He actually had a really good game. He said, I don't think tight end, and I'll say the back, even the K-State tight end actually had made some good plays too. He's like H-back, fullback, Sinat, whatever his name is. He made a few plays against Texas. I think if a tight end's going to make plays against Texas, it'll be in the screen game. Remember the Iowa State tight end made a lot of plays in the screen game. The plays that Jared Wiley made, they were like stalk, block, and go. They were kind of counter clues plays, right? Counter concept plays. So I think that's how tight ends can make plays against Texas. If you're just going with a tight end that can just beat Texas athletically, you don't find them, right? Tight ends usually are guys who are finding matchup advantages against linebackers who can't move, who can't run. Texas linebackers are great in space. You're talking about Jalen Ford, maybe the best coverage linebacker in the country, or one of them. You're talking about, Anthony Hill, who's just a freak of nature as a linebacker. The linebacker that probably has the most issues in coverage is Benda. And Benda's usually only out there on run-oriented downs or standard downs or run-heavy teams. That's not Washington. I don't expect to see a lot of Bender in this matchup. So, the linebackers for Texas are, Mo Blackwell, the former safety playing linebacker. The linebackers are so athletic, it's hard for you to just straight up beat the linebackers if you're a pass catching tight end. Now, like I said, can you have screens and work the screen game like Iowa State did, like Kansas State did? Yeah, you can do that. TCU had some stalk block and go against Jahdae Barron that worked really well. So I think that's the way to beat Texas with a tight end. I think that's the way Washington will go, right? Washington knows you're going to be preoccupied with their 3 NFL wide receivers. So if your linebacking core is going to be preoccupied with the inside breaking routes, which I'll get to in a second, which concern me. And with that, you can see I'll see a delayed release from a tight end, a late release from a tight end, maybe a dragging up where they can drag him from one side of the formation to the other. I could definitely see that happening if they got the time. So yes, screen game for the tight end, late and delayed releases for the tight end. I think that actually could play a role against the Texas defense. Texas defense, they're so aggressive that at times it works against them. That means you can use their aggression against them because they're going to be fast flow to the football. They always are. So when they fast flow, screens work really well, right? When they're fast flow, misdirection works really well because they're usually going to be seed dog, hunt dog, that kind of thing, right? So you make that work against Texas, and I think Washington will try that, especially with all the misdirection and pre-snap motion they throw out there. Yeah,
I wanted to touch on Bender real quick because, like you said, I think of the linebackers, he's probably the most susceptible to getting beat in pass coverage. Texas is going to use Anthony Hill off the edge. We've seen it a number of times in big games, whether it be Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Alabama. He's been thrown around that defensive front pretty often. When he does move there, do you think it's more likely that a Blackwell is moved into kind of that true middle linebacker spot that was previously manned by Hill? On those obvious passing downs, I'm certainly considering 2nd and long, 3rd and long, 3rd and 8+, whatever it might be.
Yep.
If you're asking Hill to get after the passer, who then fills his spot in your eyes?
Yeah, I honestly, I would be hesitant to put Bender out there too often unless Dylan Johnson is just gashing the run game. And I think the way they're going to run Dylan Johnson is away from Byron Murphy and Devondre Sweat. I don't think they're going to run at Texas. They're going to try to run around Texas.
They would be smart not to.
Exactly, right? That's just stupid. That's just not smart football. So I think they'll try to run around Texas, try to get to the edges, which Dylan Johnson does really well. I worry about, though, when they do put Blackwell, I think you'll see some of that Blackwell package. When they put Blackwell and Anthony Hill out there, I think they're going to try to blitz, whether it be from the edges or from the interior. When they blitz, I am a little worried about leverage for Texas. We talked about PK mentioned that they changed the leverage up earlier this season, and it helped them out in coverage. I was complaining about Texas having bad leverage in coverage most of the season, and they fixed some of those issues, mostly just being more aggressive and playing more heavy inside leverage. But when you do blitz and the ball's going to come out quick, usually it's coming out to inside breaking routes. Those a lot of times are the hots for the quarterback. Texas has struggled versus inside breaking routes, even against Washington last season. 69% completion percentage on inside cuts, 50% conversion rate on those inside cuts on money downs last season. You fast forward to this season, and Texas also has struggled versus inside breaking routes. Almost 61% completion percentage allowed, damn near 9 yards per attempt allowed. They have got 3 interceptions, but they also have allowed 3 touchdowns. So Texas has struggled, and Texas allowing teams to convert damn near 53% of their 3rd and 4th downs, money downs, targeting inside breaking routes. That could be a concern versus Washington. So if you're blitzing on those money downs, make sure you got heavy inside leverage so you can force him to throw outside the numbers or force a difficult over-the-shoulder throw for the quarterback.
I'm glad you brought up the in-breaking routes, but I also wanted to touch on the underneath crossing routes because against Houston, I think that was the biggest takeaway from that game. That was an issue. Texas got beat pretty bad on those underneath crossing routes. I think the adjustments were made at home the next week. I think Kansas tried to run something similar to that. Texas did well. It still effective. We saw, opponents throughout the year after Houston even continue to get the ball, down the field a little bit, but it wasn't with the ease, and it wasn't with the busted coverages that we saw against Houston, and that's concerning. Have you seen anything in that regard on the short, shallow crossing routes that lead you to believe Texas has figured out what was a pretty glaring issue in that Houston game?
Yeah, and by the way, just so everybody knows, I took the backup quarterbacks out of my sample size. I did. It was skewing the sample size, and so the backup quarterbacks they played this year, Kansas, the Wyoming kid that was thrown out there, the backup Baylor, I took them out. So I only my numbers are versus Power 5 starting quarterbacks. All right, which I think gives you a more accurate sample size because those guys, a lot of times, they didn't even know they were going to play in that game. They're just thrown out there. So I'm looking at game planning for the week mostly, and teams that were able to do that, like U of H, as you mentioned, with a starting quarterback, inside breaking routes, including those drag routes, over 13 yards per attempt. They were 5 of 7 on third downs on inside breaking routes, damn near 69% completion percentage against U of H. And Texas did try to fix it, but TCU was still 80% completion percentage, over 10 yards per attempt on inside breaking routes. You go look at Iowa State actually they were 7 of 10, 70% completion percentage on inside breaking routes. So teams still had success versus it, but you're right. They weren't giving up the chunk yards plays. They were tackling better, in a better position to tackle those inside breaking routes. Against U of H, they were, plays with team and TCU too. They were breaking away. What happened was against Oklahoma State and against Texas Tech, Texas decided to play more bump and run coverage than they played all season long. That took away all the inside breaking routes. Oklahoma State, they only got 30 yards on inside breaking routes. I believe Tech was 19 yards on inside breaking routes. I mean, they got basically nothing on inside breaking routes. Yeah, Texas suffocated, which was great. It's really good. That's a great adjustment. But the Kim Kardashian, Nicki Minaj, Serena Williams size, Cardi B size, Megan Thee Stallion size, but is that Oklahoma State, because Mike Gundy's a hell of a coach, he decided, okay, if y'all going to play bump and run coverage, we taking y'all up top with double moves, out and ups, and deep balls. And they went 3 of 7 on passes 20 yards or more down the field. Does not include the PI. That is not on Jadae Barron. Does not include what probably should have been a PI on that first drive of the game that Gundy was upset about. Probably should have been another post route that was hit. Guy was wide open. Texas lost him, and quarterback just couldn't hit him. Those are very concerning. Now you're going against the best passing offense in the country with 3 NFL wide receivers. If you come play press, they will have the same adjustment, which will be they're going to take you up top, and they complete 44% of their deep balls, 20 yards or more down the field. That's my concern. So just be very judicious, just strategic. And when you play press and when you don't, I do think you have to do it on money downs at times, though. I would do it on money downs, especially third and medium, third and short. Take away those easy completions for Michael Penix, because that's what beat you last year. I mean, the guy averaged his lowest yards per attempt in 2 years, but it was the underneath stuff, man. I think he was like 16 of 18 on 0 to 9 yards. Screens, they killed Texas running screens. So I think that's where you want to try to be aggressive on those downs.
It's interesting because that's kind of the approach that we've come to accept with Texas. Let that kind of beat them. Prove to Texas and Pete Kowski specifically that you can drive down the field methodically, consistently without turning the ball over, and then find ways in the end zone. That's been the approach. The whole bend but don't break. Texas gives up a lot of yards, and I know that was kind of a gripe Texas fans had early in PK's tenure before seeing the full work of, on-field product come out and fully say, this is what the Texas defense is. They're going to give up yards, but they're not going to allow a lot of points. So if you want to walk down the field with these 3, 4, 5, passes down the field, be my guest. Because we've also seen Texas be very aggressive against one-read quarterbacks like a young, inexperienced Jaylen Milro when Jadae Barron and Jaron Thompson jump in front of these quick one-step and go kind of passing routes. That's going to be something I think to monitor. But to that point, Penix and how experienced he is, especially in this Kalen DeBoer system, not going to be a guy who I would say beat pre-snap. He's going to sit there. He's going to evaluate where alignment is, coverages are. Pre-snap, he's very good at that. But there has been moments, Rod, so far that we saw against Oregon very early in that game, and then dating back to Arizona State where they didn't score an offensive touchdown. The movement by the secondary and even linebackers can cause fits. Mm-hmm. How much of that do you think will be on the field tonight for Texas?
Yeah, I think Texas will utilize it. Even watching the Alamo Bowl from last season, Texas in the back seven, they moved around and shifted the pre-snap look and the post-snap look a little bit, and it caused one interception for Michael Penix in that game early on that Jaron Thompson got, and he was just confused and still threw it up for grabs because he trusted his wide receiver would be there. Think about these pre-snap. The pre-snap movement for the defense, the shell coverage look, obviously in presentation being different than the post-snap look, is not only to confuse the quarterback. The wide receivers oftentimes are making side adjustments.
Yeah.
All right, they're making side adjustments based on, okay, this is a zone, this is a man. Okay, this guy's going to be here in this zone, so I'm gonna settle down in this part of the zone, that kind of thing, and they can get it wrong based on your pre-snap movement and shift. So it's not just for the quarterback. You're going to try to confuse it. And sometimes I've seen that. Actually, that miscommunication happened a lot with Washington. I remarked about that earlier. So every now and then they'll just throw it to nobody, and he says, "Well, my receiver was supposed to be there." Miscommunication on our part. So I agree with you. I think for Texas, I think it's gonna be key for Texas on defense against Michael Penix to throw all that at him. I think you need pre-snap. Looks need to change. The presentation should change, pre-snap and post-snap. I think you're going to have to blitz from the edge and also from the interior. You're going to have to, what Texas does, I think, naturally as a defense, stop the run, make them one-dimensional. If you can do that, that's half the battle. If Dylan Johnson's going off, then help us. God help us, because Texas might be in trouble then. Because we know they're going to be able to make plays in the pass game, but if Dylan Johnson can also make plays in the running game, then it's going to be a long day. None of us anticipate that happening because Texas rush defense is so damn good, and running backs just don't really have great days in the traditional running game against Texas. So Texas got to make it one-dimensional, and yes, you want to press your corners every now and then, situations as I brought up, to take away the easy completions. All these things are going to have to happen at one time or another, and it's going to be on PK to be able to win the chess match in the game, to know when to press the corners, when to blitz from the edge, when to blitz in the interior. When does he want to, be more conservative and drop guys back? When does he want to put an extra defender in the box? When does he want to play too high? I can't wait to see. It's a great, I think, opportunity for PK to put a kind of bow on this season about the reinvention of Texas football, to show that he's a big part of this reinvention of this defense. We talk about Devontae Sweat, we talk about Bo Davis, and we talk about Jalen Ford and Janae Barron. We never bring up PK. Everybody thinks Gary Patterson is still back there calling the plays or something. They never want to give him any credit. So I think this is a big game for PK to be the star. We don't want to be the star, but for him to be the star, because it's going to be on how he calls this game, in my opinion, if that Texas defense is going to be able to neutralize that Washington offense.
I think that's an interesting point. I was going to bring up Pete Kowski anyway. For a guy that doesn't like the spotlight, he absolutely deserves some shine for how this defense has continued to improve. You mentioned Gary Patterson and the step that it took from 2021 to 2022. Yeah, it was easy to say. Gary Patterson was here. That's why. No. Then taking another jump this year into that elite top 15 scoring category right now. Yep. Pete Kowski, if there was a hire that Steve Sarkisian had to knock out of the park whenever he was hired, he did it with Pete Kowski. If there's only one fan of his left on the earth, it's me. I like Pete Kowski and what he's done everywhere that he's been. He's been a very good defensive coordinator, and you can expect a very similar game plan to what we saw last year, which kind of prevented Michael Penix from really getting into a groove vertically down the field again tonight. I think that's going to be a staple. How Texas is able to get pressure on the quarterback and get Penix down to the ground, we'll have to wait and see. But one guy I know that could certainly make things a whole lot easier for Texas is Ethan Burke. And we've seen him show up in big games so far this year. A sack and a half against Alabama, the forced fumble against Kansas State on the goal line that led right to a 2-yard touchdown the next play. If Texas gets anything similar to that from Ethan Burke tonight, you have to feel very good about that defense in its entirety. So, yes, we've been talking about the edge pressure with Anthony Hill and some interior guys as well. If Barron Sorrell or Justice Finkley or Ethan Burke are able to throw their hat in the ring as well and get into the sector, into the backfield, I mean, that's just going to help the Texas defense out in a way that I probably am expecting them not to totally expect coming into the game.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, if the Texas edges are making impact plays in this game, Texas going to win the game. Yep. Because we know T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy are going to make plays. And even if they don't make plays, the amount of resources and the amount of effort and attention it's going to take from that offensive line to neutralize those two threats, it's going to make life real easy on a Barron Sorrell or an Ethan Burke or anyone coming off of that edge, because those tackles will be on islands. Now, they love those tackles, and trust me, those guys are NFL players. They really are. Rosengarten has allowed 0. Actually, Rosengarten has been better in pass protection this year than Fauatano. He's actually, I think he's allowed 10 pressures, 10 pressures the entire season, and 0 sacks for Rosengarten, the right tackle. 2 quarterback hits is all he allowed the entire season. Fauatano has allowed 19 pressures, damn near double, 2 sacks, and 2 quarterback hits. So that's the person you want to go after is Fauatano. You don't want to go after Rosengarten. And I wonder if you can get those guys on an island, and I think they will be, because it'll take, I think, every possible man on that offensive line they got, every free man, including some help from the running back position and H-backs as well, to try to stop T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, especially since they've been talking a little trash through now. I think those tackles will be on an island, and that's a great opportunity for, like you said, Ethan Burke or an Anthony Hill, who's ever out there, to make some plays against those guys. It won't be easy, though. Those guys don't give up a lot of plays.
No, and luckily for Texas, the Longhorn offensive line doesn't allow a lot of sacks either.
No.
Quinn at times is a little bit, playing patty cake with the football a little bit too much. That's probably the biggest criticism I have for him right now with the way he's developed this season. But that Texas offensive line, very good. I want to go through the pressures allowed for this Texas offensive line so far. We'll start at left tackle. Kelvin Banks, only 9. Hayden Connor, 10. Jake Majors is at 6. DJ Campbell has been probably the shakiest. You would expect that from a first-year contributor on the offensive line. 15 pressures, 6 sacks. So if there's going to be, kind of a question mark on that offensive line and really a spot for Washington to attack, it's going to be DJ Campbell. Christian Jones on the outside, 10 pressures as well. So when you compare that to this Washington offensive line, who is the Joe Moore Award-winning offensive line this year, the pressures are similar, the sack numbers are not. And so I think that's a testament more to Michael Penix being able to escape the pocket, maneuver through pressures, and not necessarily give himself up as we've seen Quinn Ewers do. That's the next step for Quinn. Tonight, you need that clean pocket, because negative plays, you can't have them. Can't have them in a game like this.
That's a great point. And, I brought this up earlier this week. Texas played a lot of great edge rushers last season. First round talent. They played 4 of them, actually. Ended up playing Will Anderson, Tyree Wilson, Will McDonald, Felix Anudike-Uzomah. Essentially, it's why everybody decided, okay, Kelvin Banks, he's a first-round pick whenever he's eligible for the draft, because that guy against first-round talent as a freshman, probably performed as well as anybody performed against those guys. The tape was immaculate. Those players, all of them combined, didn't have as many, basically combined, they had as many sacks as Braylon Trice had in that game in the Alamo Bowl by himself. Because Will Anderson had a sack. I think Tyree Wilson had a half a sack. That was it. So Braylon Trice with 2 sacks in the Alamo Bowl had more sacks than all 4 of those first-round edge rushers combined. He had 6 tackles. That was more tackles than any of those edge rushers had. Felix Udoka tied him. He had 6. And he had 2 tackles for loss. That was the best stat line of any edge rusher versus Texas. It was better than all the other first-round talent Texas has played. So Braylon Trice is the real deal.
Yeah.
70 pressures last season and 70 this year. You definitely got to have a plan for him. And the good news is he's, as you point out, CJ, he's their only guy. He's their war daddy. If you have a plan for him, then everybody else should be easier for you to block and easier for you to game plan for. I'll throw this out there. I threw it out there 2-3 weeks ago. they do have this kid, Zach Durfee, that they keep bragging about. All right. And the coaches keep bragging. The coaches are bragging about him. I wouldn't care if it was just analysts talking about him. All right. Brock Hewitt brought him up. I was like, that's interesting. But then Brock Hewitt's quoting Kalen DeBoer, and Kalen DeBoer is saying, this guy, this is Kalen DeBoer quote from a couple weeks ago. This guy here, he has played on our scout team. You can't play with the Warrens because he wasn't eligible. He said he is going up against Fautanu and Rosengarten, and ask them about this dude. Ask them, and they will tell you he's one of the hardest guys to block on our team, and he's an absolute baller. And then Hewitt goes on to say he has a powerful 260-pound explosive difference maker. This dude is going to come in here, and I'm telling you right now, when you watch the Texas game, you're going to watch the game, and Husky fans are going to say, who is this guy they just picked up off the street? Is this some freshman? Is this some early enrollee? I didn't think that happened until spring. Where did they get this guy? He's going to be a force in the semifinal, and Kalen DeBoer was hoping he would have him ready earlier, but now he's ready. Here's another quote. I just got this one from the defensive end coach. When he was asked about Durfee, he said, genetically, he's maybe the best in the defensive end room.
Wow.
This guy who can run the fastest, who can jump the highest, who's the strongest. You know what I mean? I think he might be pound for pound that guy. He ain't going to break every down. What he going to do? This is why I'm telling Texas, stay out of third and long. Because when you get in third and long, they're going to trot this dude out there. I guarantee you. They already run what they call a turbo package. That's when they put their edge rushers to Newfie. I'm sure I screwed it up, did not mean to. Jacob Lane. They put them at defensive tackle. They put Fatui in there at DN and Braylon Trice at DN. So they got DNs all across the board. They're going to put Durfee in this package as a way to break tendency. I guarantee you, if you're in predictable passing situations, so just know it, because they consider him physically to be the most talented guy in that room, including Braylon Trice being in there. And they say he's a dude because he's been giving their starting offensive lineman fits all season long. Throwing it out there. Be ready for it.
Yeah. I mean, there is ever a time to add an all-conference caliber talent to your defense. I mean,
yeah. Be ready for it.
What an addition to that Huskies defense. So, Bobby, welcome back.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad I'm here. Met some people out there. Rod, you have some fans here, by the way. I just want to say.
Nice.
I heard people. CJ's mom and dad. I met your mom and dad.
Go.
Yeah, there we go. There in the background. There we go. I hear Rod talk about Zach Durfee, and he's been doing it to me for about 2 weeks now, and I hate him for it. I hate the unknown.
Just saying. Guy got 11 sacks and 13 and a half tackles for loss last year, all conference for Sioux Falls. But hey, man, he's a baller. That's what they say.
It's over. Like you said, Rod, you either know how to rush the passer or you don't. He does.
Boom.
All right. Hey, Rod, you can take a little R&R here as we get going back to our programming here. Rod, thanks. We'll see you in about 30 minutes, buddy. You have a good one.
All right, fellas. See ya.
All right. I felt like that guy was over my shoulder just now in the background here.
Making a sandwich?
Hey, y'all had some good time. People are here at Manning's kind of milling around. Everything's starting to get filled up.
Oh, yeah.
You can feel like it's about an hour and a half to about 2 hours before I think this place is going to be rocking. Right now, everybody's getting – I had a meat pie, by the way. Have you had a Louisiana meat pie?
Oh, I'm not sure I know what that is.
It's pretty good.
All right.
I don't know what the meat was, but it tasted good.
There we go. As long as it's keeping you up here. Energy
absolutely.
ready to go.
Absolutely. I'm upright. CJ, we've gone through a bunch of different aspects of this game, and we talked about our picks and selections. We talked about who we think are going to be the surprise players, who's the player, and I'm not talking about you. You can't say Kelvin Jones and or Kelvin Banks and Christian Jones.
Got it.
Who are your guys that have to do something today? Like, who does Quinn Ewers have to have an A+ game, or Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, etc.? Who has to really bring it today?
Oof. In a game like this, you'd like everybody to play an A+ game, huh? But
Well, yeah.
I point to Quinn Ewers, and I don't necessarily think he needs to play the best game of his career tonight. I think Texas has proven with CJ Baxter, Jaden Blue, especially as of late, that running back room can still produce and get the ball down the field if Ewers isn't necessarily on. A guy that hasn't been talked a lot is Jahdae Barron, because we all talk about Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk on the outside. These NFL, day 2 quality guys get all the attention. I'm looking at Jahdae Barron on the interior, not only coming in to help and really eliminate the run game from inside the box. Washington doesn't throw laterally all too often. They do go down the field more so than Texas does by a lot. What I mean by this is Jalen McMillan is a guy that cannot beat Texas, because all that attention, like I said, is going to go to Polk and Rome Odunze. Jalen McMillan lines in the slot 90% of his snaps. His average target of distance is only 10 yards. But there's a very good shot that we see Jalen McMillan go deep on a slot fade or a late breaking post. And that's been where Jahdae Barron has gotten beat sometimes this year. You look back to Isaiah Bond at Alabama. They took advantage of him there in the third quarter. And obviously Oklahoma State, I would say, was probably the roughest game for Jahdae Barron this year. So that is a spot that I'm looking at specifically, because we've talked about all year just how talented and impactful Jahdae has been to this team. I was even clamoring for him to be an All-American midway through the season because he was just that good. But I think this is a game where Jahdae cannot afford to be beat deep. Let Washington, drive down the field play by play without the chunk yards. That's where Texas and Jahdae specifically has to be very careful.
I'm looking at this games up here right now, and 14-21, LSU down to Wisconsin, nearing the end of the half. That's a little surprising.
Yep.
What's not surprising is Iowa and Tennessee with a new quarterback are at 0-0. What was the over on that? 20 points?
Couldn't imagine it was much higher. They ought to just immediately turn an Iowa and brand new Tennessee quarterback game into a overtime situation from the get-go. Save everybody the time.
This start them at the 2.
Yeah.
You can look at that, and then Liberty currently beating Oregon. So my player that I think needs to truly bring it today is Byron Murphy.
Yeah.
He is a star. So is Tavondre Sweat.
Certainly.
But my issue with Byron is this. He's been lower rated. Not many people are talking about him. And they don't understand him. But I feel very, very strong that he's going to have a great game tonight. I just feel like he's going to be the guy that all of a sudden everybody talks about Tavondre. And I think Tavondre is going to help clog the middle. But I think Murphy has a chance to really do some damage inside.
Yeah, Byron Murphy, the leading pressure getter from the Texas defensive line. A bit surprising it's not coming from the edge, and we've talked about Braylon Trice having 70. Murphy has 40 through the middle. And that is something that if you can generate pressure from the middle and get the quarterback uncomfortable, that creates a whole lot more issues than just a typical guy coming around the edge. So I like that pick a lot.
I tell you what, I've got a guy joining us now. His name is Rick Vasquez. And Rick is one of the owners or the creators of Surly Horns, which is a message board community, but it's great. I want to say this, Rick. Everybody here is in some part here because of you. You helped organize this. You were the product manager, program manager of all of this stuff, reserving the venue, setting up the purchase stuff, getting the venue, all of those things. And I want to say we thank you. Yes, and you got some of those. I want to say thank you and let you talk to people about what this has done, how much it's raised for one fund, and all of that stuff.
Yeah, so it's looking like it's going to be a sellout, folks. We sold out pre-sale tickets, which was really great. That was 4 days early. And then We got here day of, and it's like on track for us to be done before noon. So if you want to come to the party, come now. And then what that means, like what does a full sellout mean for us at Texas One Fund? It really means that there is more than $100,000 in NIL contributions between every single person in this room contributed to Texas NIL today. And a really interesting data point that we have from all of the registrations, and one of the survey questions we asked is, have you ever participated in NIL in any way, shape, or form, whether that's Surly Horns Burn Ends, which is for the tight ends, or whether that's donating to One Fund, or even doing stuff like on Cameo or just supporting a student athlete with a signature. And 78% of people who are in attendance today or have bought tickets have not contributed at all to NIL. And I think this is a testament to the power that the Texas fan base can do something with NIL without having to have this kind of like pressure and feel that it has to be a one-on-one deal with a player, and that we can do that and spread that love, not just in the football side of things, but also in rowing, in swimming, in track and field, in volleyball, women's national champions, back-to-back volleyball. Like, that's awesome. And one of the really incredible things that Texas One Funds allows us to do is really fund those NIL programs. And we're so excited to have everyone here and have a sea of burnt orange at this restaurant and at the restaurant across the street. It's been fantastic.
All right. You got to leave. I think everybody appreciates what you've done. But before you do that, let's start a Texas fight.
There we go.
You ready? Go.
Texas! 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 Hook 'em!
Horns!
We're not doing no.
Oh, you!
They most definitely do suck.
What time is it? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And we got these really cool coins. 2 of 2. Only 2 in existence. $750 each.
Oh, wow. All of that goes to NIL and to Jonathan Brooks. Look, I love it, dude. That it's people like Rick that make Texas a special place.
Absolutely.
Like, it takes all of us. We don't have to be, the biggest money donors to be a part of what we're trying to do here.
No.
That's part of the greatness of it.
That was awesome.
Yep.
That Texas fight. I can't wait to hear that more. That was good stuff.
I'll never forget my favorite Texas fight of all time was my first Texas OU game.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I thought I'd never heard so many people sing Texas fight over and over and over. Like, it never stopped for about 15 minutes walking up those ramps. That was my favorite ones ever.
That's always my favorite place to hear it, because it's just the magnitude in which that side of the stadium just exudes the loudness, the noise. It's so much fun. So I'm with you.
I wish they would have performed a little better today. Or not today, but this year.
Sure.
But look, Texas right now sitting at 12-1. Washington 13-0. We look at this game and we think Washington's got the 6-year quarterback. They've got the adult offensive line, yep. Joe Moore award winner. They've got these 3 wide receivers, all of them bound for the NFL. It sounds like this almost insurmountable task. How does it not? Like, is it Sweat, Murphy have to make plays? Somebody on the back end? You have to hope for a little bit of Penix having some issues at time. Make some of that up as far as what you're thinking.
I mean, if you go position by position for both teams, it's as even as it gets, except for one spot, and that's the defensive line, specifically the interior. That's where Texas and Byron Murphy, Tavondre Sweat, Alfred Collins, Vernon Broughton, that's where those guys need to be the game breakers. That's where they need to really be the most impactful part of that Texas defense, is in the middle. Do not allow Washington to get any type of momentum running the football and create pressures up the gut. That's where Oregon was able to get to Michael Penix in the Pac-12 championship game. right up the gut. If they're able to do anything along the lines of that, I feel very confident in saying the Texas defense will have a pretty good showing tonight. It won't be a perfect showing. Obviously, Washington's 13-0, and they put up a lot of points for a reason. But if you can stop the run and force Washington's hand into only being able to drop back to pass, that's where Texas is able to create separation from Washington.
All right. Somebody just asked, where can they buy the coin? Come up here, and I'll make sure you get in touch with Rick whenever you get here, and we'll take care of that. Again, all of it going to NIL. So appreciate that. All right, we've got other comments we want to get to from the chat and talk a little bit about. Here's one that I mentioned earlier. RJ from Chatsville. Alfred Collins is going to bring it today. He knows scouts are watching. We are hearing that it will be Collins's last game, most likely JT Sanders. Oh, I should say last game if they lose. There's going to be another game, though.
Good.
So we're hoping for Houston. But it sounds like the swan song of sorts for a number of really talented players. Jalen Ford, Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy.
Christian Jones.
Yeah, guys that have been pillars of the program, but help that program take the next step.
I think that's a great point that we just talked about with Alfred Collins. I mentioned this with Jatavian Sanders earlier in the week. They know that there is question marks surrounding their NFL talent, and these scouts are going to be watching this game very closely, not only because it means a whole lot, but because it's one final example of what they are on the field. I mentioned it this week. This will be the best, the hardest, and the most efficient we've seen Jatavian Sanders in the blocking game as a Longhorn, because he knows that's the biggest question mark, and that's really the biggest thing kind of hovering over his draft stock right now is how physical is he? If he's going to play tight end in the NFL, you're going to have to inline block. You're going to have to create running lanes. You can't just be that one guy off the, lined up outside in the slot as that, pass threat. You're going to have to sit inside the trenches in the NFL and block. For Jatavian Sanders specifically, that's the question mark. He will come out. I'm very confident in this, Bobby. He will come out tonight and be the most physical that we have seen from him. Alfred Collins, very much in that same boat about the question marks, about how he projects in the NFL. I think in those limited snaps that we see from him in the interior, you'll see him get after the quarterback pretty quickly.
All right. We're about 2 hours and 30 minutes into what we've been talking about this morning, and now into the afternoon. Should be a game that will get started in about 7 hours from right now. It's 12:47. Longhorns going to do their very best this afternoon and evening to be the team to beat. You picked Quinn Ewers / all of them, basically, and I picked Byron Murphy.
I got Jade Barron in there.
And Jade Barron. Yeah, I forget about Jade. Any other aspects of it that you want to bring up?
We talked about it earlier. I think Texas needs to be aware of the threat of the tight end in the passing game. It's not something Washington does often, but there have been very impactful plays this season where the Washington tight ends have made almost game-saving plays for them. So there is trust. There is, the willingness at times to go to them. Clearly not a strength. Otherwise, we'd be talking about them a whole lot more. But Texas, the linebacking core specifically, if David Bend is in the game, I look at Washington to target him as a guy that, necessarily is his strength to drop back into coverage. Coming downhill off of blitzing, that's where he makes his money. But if he's in the game, look for the Washington tight ends to be a little bit more involved than what we probably would have expected a couple weeks ago.
I love it. All right. This is from Kevin Jones. Rod and CJ. PK's best friend is the OC at Washington. He's more of the offensive line coach, right? Scott Huff. Does that make a difference in critical moments as far as maybe knowing the mind of your opponent? How about both ways? Because it wouldn't just be PK on him.
Yeah.
It'd be him on PK.
You know, it would make sense to point to that and be like, you know, these guys know each other's tendencies. They know what they want to do. But two things. Sark and, Nick Saban worked together. Sark worked under Nick Saban. Everything about what Sarkisian brings to a game plan, Nick Saban knows. That didn't necessarily fare well for Alabama this year in week 2. Also, what have we talked about a whole lot this week? Breaking tendencies. So while there's an entire, approach and rapport that these coaches have behind the scenes, they know what they like to do in certain situations. We've sat here for the last 3 or 4 weeks saying, well, we know what they're not going to do, and it's going to be exactly what we've seen over the last 4 months. So I think while it's interesting that they know a little bit about each other, certainly what they like to do, the last month is all about scheming, game planning, and coming into the game with a good approach. All of that is going to be out the window the minute that tendencies are broken. So I don't think it's going to be a whole big factor that you would normally think. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, Bobby.
I feel like Texas has to basically get over the idea that they're going to run over this guy or over this team and be the end all be all. Like, I think the idea of a blowout like Texas Tech and Oklahoma State, I don't think that's going to happen. So Texas is going to have to play a mid game. They're going to have to play, and when I say a mid game, a mind game, fourth down, or fourth quarter, fourth down, third and short. They're going to have to win those types of plays and quarters.
Absolutely.
If we don't see that, then I think that gives Washington an open door, because that's what they've been doing all season, right? We like the fact that Texas went out there and stomped Tech and Oklahoma State. That's not likely to happen. They may win by 2 scores, but it's going to be an Alabama win by 2 scores, where you're down in the fourth quarter and you're going to have to still summon that energy from within. That's the only way I see it.
Yep.
And so I think it's going to be a tough game mentally. That's where
I'm with you. And I wanted to bring this up because obviously the focus is Texas and Washington, but there's a game at 4:45, which has a lot of implications as well. Bobby, we've seen, dating back to the implementation of the college football playoff, semifinal games haven't been close. I think it's almost a 75% clip of games just being total blowouts. Do you see a total possibility of either of these games being a blowout at all?
It's going to surprise people, but I could see Michigan blowing out Alabama.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's surprising me.
I talked to some people this week that are national level scouts and watch these teams like a hawk. And Michigan has the fewest holes of any team left in the playoffs. Doesn't mean they have the highest strengths, but they have the fewest holes. They said their defense makes fewer mistakes than anybody left in the playoffs. And I question whether or not they could cover Texas or cover Washington, because Texas and Washington both have these group of receivers that, other than Ohio State, nobody else in the Big Ten really has. And their comment was, well, I think they have 3 NFL DBs for sure. A corner that may be a first rounder, a nickel that is a second or third rounder, and a safety that it's a second or third rounder.
Stall, back deep.
Yep.
Very good.
And so if their front can handle Alabama and Jaylen Milro's run game, I think they've got what it takes on the back end to eliminate the big play action pass that Bama and Milro have kind of lived on.
I was going to ask you about Michigan, because when you think about Michigan's offensive approach, it's run down your throat, kind of control the time of possession, allow J.J. McCarthy to be efficient but not overly involved.
He didn't throw a pass in the second half against Penn State.
I wanted to put it kindly there, but you get what I'm saying. That's kind of the approach that they have, and I don't think anybody's going to be surprised by that. What is going to be a little bit of a test to me when watching this first semifinal game is Michigan's losing what would have been a first-round offensive guard in Zach Zinter. They've been without him since the Ohio State game. Is that something that you could see potentially Alabama capitalizing on? Or do you think because of how well that they've been able to maintain a strong, sufficient running game that they'll just be able to plug in place and continue chugging forward?
I think it'll give them problems. I think the Alabama defensive front is athletic enough to give everybody problems.
Yeah.
But I do think they're going to ultimately be able to run against those guys.
Sorry.
All right. I would add one other thing that we talk about a little bit as it relates to Alabama and Michigan. I feel like containing Jaylen Milro makes him a largely ineffective quarterback.
Okay.
And I think Michigan, with a month to prepare, they're going to have something for Jaylen Milro where his legs, even though he's terrific, may not be able to get it done.
Yeah. I don't want to call him Lamar Jackson, but you see the similarities with his game, obviously, because of how well and, dangerous he can be in the running game. The thing I like about Milro is his really blind confidence that his wide receivers are going to go down the field and make big plays in the deep passing game. And that's really been the bread and butter of their offense. It's been Milro cooking in the underneath, kind of scurrying around kind of offense, and then breaking the top off the defense. That's where Alabama's at its most dangerous. I don't necessarily think Milro is a guy who can methodically drive down the field against a defense like Michigan with much success continually. He will have the big plays. He will get loose. But if you can minimize that and obviously keep a guy between a receiver and the end zone, you're going to like your chances when you consider the talent on both sides of the ball.
Do you think he's more Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts? I think he's more Jalen Hurts. Yeah.
I think Lamar. I still think Jalen Hurts to me runs because he's athletic, not because that's part of his strength. I think Jalen Hurts is, especially this year after he got a little dinged up in the knee, Jalen Hurts looks like a timid runner to me. He doesn't have that make you miss ability because I think he's a little timider this year, more so than probably previous years. Lamar Jackson at any time I think is a guy, like going back to Vic, I think he's more Michael Vick in the sense that he can score at any given time with the ball in his hands than a Jalen Hurts can. But I do think passing-wise, he's probably more on the Jalen Hurts side. And I
guess I'm thinking the freshman, sophomore in college.
Fair.
Jalen Hurts. Just for the record. You mentioned whether or not Michigan can move the ball and the loss of the offensive lineman. I just feel like Harbaugh does a good job of utilizing a tight end who's going to be a first-round pick, by the way. As a sophomore, he's going to end up being a guy. I just feel like they're going to have a little something. I worry about this for Michigan fans. You remember how Nick Saban used to be so pro-oriented that sometimes he played it too close to the vest and didn't let it go on offense? I worry about that for Michigan, that sometimes Harbaugh plays it too close to the vest and doesn't really let it go. And therefore, when they have a chance to go up by 10, they're only going up by 6,
Do you think that's almost a byproduct of being a Big Ten team and kind of I don't want to say way the games are played, but kind of that style of Big Ten football is possessions, get on top, hold the lead? Is it not always going for the kill shot?
I don't think it's Big Ten as much as the NFL.
Okay.
That's how Kirk Ferentz coaches too.
Clearly, yeah.
I mean, they like to keep it in the teens, mid-20s, and that's what they play for. And that works until somebody gets on top of you quick, like TCU did to them last year.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden you're playing catch up and you've never done it before.
That was my next question. If Alabama gets out to an early lead, is Michigan built to come back?
That's a fair question. I don't think Alabama starts fast on offense, though. Maybe one score, but
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a fair question.
We haven't done our deep dive on that game seemingly as we have with here, and that's why we're on Texas football.
Yeah. We'll leave that to Greg McElroy. I saw Greg McElroy, by the way, yesterday or day before at Harris Casino. A lot of different people in there, by the way. That was kind of interesting. But including a former Washington or a current Washington player was in there. Just saying. Anyways, all right, let's get back to the chat board here. Orlando Garcia asked, how does competition fare from the Pac-12 versus the Big 12? When push comes to shove, will the better talent of these two teams shine through?
Interesting, because I think the Big 12 narrative has flipped defensively in the last 5 years to what the Pac-12 is today. So Pac-12 defensively is what everybody a couple of years ago thought the Big 12 was. It's no longer the case. The Big 12 plays, I would say, a cutting-edge style of defense that is now finally catching on and becoming kind of a mainstream approach to the defensive side of the ball. You talk about the three high, obviously the first-round edge talents that we've seen week in and week out seemingly over the last 2 years. The Pac-12 doesn't have that depth. What I do think is interesting, go look at the passing team pass yards allowed standings. You won't find a Pac-12 team, or at least many of them, inside the top 50. Arizona State, way back. USC, way back. Washington, I think, is in the 120s in pass defense. That right now, even before I continue, Oregon's 78th. So the good teams in that conference are still allowing massive chunk plays through the air, which I think is almost a testament to Texas coming into this game, because they played the Iowa States, the Oklahoma States. Oklahoma was pretty good at the back half of that season defensively. They've been tested more so against good defenses than Washington has, specifically in the passing game, and that gives me a little bit of confidence coming in that otherwise it would have been a big kind of question mark because of that kind of hesitancy and lack of exuberating confidence in that Texas secondary right now.
Texas has got to do something. They got to get turnovers today.
Have to.
I don't know how that's going to happen, whether it's secondary or special teams, but I think that when you talk about confidence and building it for both sides, if Texas can get an early pick like they did, like Jade Barron did against Alabama, then it puts a little doubt in the quarterback's mind for a longer period of time, and then come back and get a pick in the fourth quarter like they did with Jaron Thompson. Those are the recipes for winning a game.
I think that early interception, if you're able to force one, it sticks around. In a game of this magnitude, to know that you're not firing at 100% confidence because of an early interception, that lingers. I call it it's almost the reverse of what I call the Russell Westbrook syndrome, where early in a game you see Russell Westbrook make a three and then you think, oh boy, now he's going to shoot 9 of them because he has that early confidence. It's the reverse of that. And so I think if either team is able to create an early turnover, it's going to be up to Kalen DeBoer and Steve Sarkisian to ease them back into a rhythm and get that confidence up again, because that lingers with you in a big moment like we'll see tonight.
I want to add this on the Pac-12 versus Big 12 talent level. They're about the same in the NFL.
Yep.
It's not, that disparate between the two teams. Pac-12, I think, has a little bit more. But now with the new teams coming to the Big 12, I don't know exactly what it is. I think both teams have high-end talent, though. Texas may have more overall draft picks. Washington, at least in the upper class ranks, has more higher-ranked draft picks.
Definitely.
So it's a little bit of a depth versus a star power type discussion, right?
I would say that. I would agree with that 100%. when you talk about the first round talent, Texas is in that conversation, but it's all fringe guys. It's all guys that, you could see a team taking them in the first round.
Like Tavondre Sweat. I mean, some people have him going as high as 22. Some don't have him going until the second round.
For Washington, it's going to be Braylon Trice, it's going to be Roma Dunze, and it's going to be Michael Penix. They're all going to hear their name called on Thursday night in the NFL draft. That's where the star power comes in. But like you said, the depth, Washington, aside from Trice, they don't have an interior guy like Sweat and Murphy. They don't have a linebacker that jumps off the page like a Jalen Ford does, specifically in the pass coverage side of things. So the depth, talent-wise, favors Texas. The star power, I would probably give a slight nod to Washington simply because of the first-round expectations for the draft.
I got a question for you. This is from Britt Rasco. And I didn't really realize this was a thing, but apparently it's legitimate. Any comment on Saban not allowing his players to review film on the personal iPads due to potential hacking? Is that just meant to be a distraction to Michigan, or is it a real possibility? This is interesting only because of one reason. Saban just hired a former Michigan assistant. So why is all of a sudden he concerned about that? I mean, do you think about that? I mean, just now he's worried about it because he hired a Michigan coach. That seems kind of coincidental to me.
No, that's a good point. I don't think I had thought about that. That's crazy. They must have got Stallions really digging deep into his Navy SEAL training there.
Well, players will send. I know this for a fact. Texas players will send screenshots of a practice to their parents if they made like a pick six or something, or if they ran a touchdown. That you get that. But hacking, like to see an entire practice and review, that would be new levels, right?
I would agree. It is worth mentioning. Alabama was practicing out in Compton prior to this week, so not a closed environment like we've seen.
They worried about drones,
I guess. But man, the cyber security hacking would be a new era of college football scouting, I would say.
All right. This is the live stream. We're here live at Manning's on Texas football. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by CJ Vogel. Rod Babers will rejoin us here in a few moments. We've got a lot of stuff going on today that we need to talk about and going to continue to talk about as the Longhorns look to go and win tonight in the Sugar Bowl. A couple of recruiting notes that we brought up early on, but want to rehash here. Dominic McKinley, the defensive lineman out of Lafayette, Louisiana, committed to LSU yesterday. He was contemplating seeing Texas again in January. We now believe that that's no longer the case. So mark that one down for the Tigers. And another X against Mike Elko and the Texas A&M Aggies. He was initially committed to Texas A&M. But we are waiting on Deuce Williams, a young man out of Pearland's Shadow Creek, a linebacker around 6'3", 195, who we talked about this, long-armed, et cetera. He's expected to announce for Texas, we believe, at 4:30 this afternoon. We'll see whether or not Deuce actually is going to make that announcement for Texas. He's also looking at Oregon, Auburn, some other schools like that. Texas now at at 3 commitments in the 2025 class. Of course, just had a top 5 recruiting class a couple of weeks ago. CJ, you have anything in particular you're thinking right now for the 2025 class as we talk a little recruiting for a second?
The 2025 classes start outside of the state of Texas has been very impressive, and it helps coming off of, clearly the run to the semifinal and, just the whole approach of Texas getting everything going recruiting-wise has allowed them to branch out nationally, and that's exactly what you want. You want to be able to sit there and go pick and choose who you want to join your football program. You don't want to be confined to the state as the only place you can go get talent. Texas has done a great job, specifically in the last 2 cycles, really, of being able to go out to Florida, go out to California. Landing a 5-star offensive lineman from California, a 5-star wide receiver out of St. Louis. That's what you want. With that, and with these guys committing so early, you now have to fend off the in-state home backyard programs for an entire year. We've obviously, discussed KJ Lacey and the push that Auburn is making right now. Texas will have to deal with that with Brandon Brown and obviously Amari Winston as well. If you continue that push, it only starts to, get a little bit more challenging, a couple more hurdles to overcome as the cycle goes. And, I mean, it's a lot of time on the road if you're the Texas staff.
I think that Texas in recruiting right now, CJ is sitting on a powder keg waiting to be lit. I just feel like you're going to have guys that want to jump in the class that Texas is going to want to still evaluate. That's a good problem to have.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's where you start selecting instead of recruiting, and hopefully Texas gets to that point in this process this year. That will be absolutely huge to them. All right, on the cusp of Cam Ward announcing for the NFL, DJ Uiagalelei has now committed to Florida State. So he is headed to Florida State, not Miami. Miami getting left out in the cold. They lost Tyler Van Dyke to Wisconsin earlier this week. So we'll see if Mario Cristobal is amassing some talent in South Beach, but who's going to be the signal caller? What's he going to do? But also, I don't know that DJU is going to be all that good for Florida State. Maybe I'm wrong.
That'll be interesting to see just how they transition to a DJU type of quarterback. At Oregon State, he was very much asked to be a game manager, and I think
that's what he wasn't asked to be that at Clemson. He was asked to win games, and he couldn't do it.
That's why he departed. That's why, Clemson was so quick to pull the trigger and go to Kate Klubnik, because that's not the style of football that DJU plays. I'm not even going to bother attempting that last name. But DJU specifically is very good at not playing outside of his talents. He stays within himself. That's what we saw at Oregon State, and that's what got him to be one of the more coveted quarterbacks this year in the portal after what had really been a fall from grace from that 5-star, high school ranking.
Got it. I want to show you all a picture. Not everybody can see it here in the audience, but we got a picture that came out yesterday. I don't know if you saw this or not, CJ. Look at this one. Rojo and Bijan Robinson playing against each other yesterday, both doing the hook 'em to one another. That's on the Bears official website. If you get a chance to see it, classic. I know both of those guys wish they were here later today as well. Two rookie running backs in the NFL, leaders of this program. I told the story yesterday about Leonga Lafau, the young linebacker. And we talked about Rojan Johnson being the guy that would go pick up the locker room as a young freshman and sophomore. And people didn't realize what he was doing. He's just doing what he thought was right. I'm being told that Leonga Lafau is the guy that's doing that right now, the young middle linebacker out of Hawaii.
Yeah. Rod and I talked about how culture trickles down if you have a good one in place. That's the prime example. That's exactly it. And it's not always, picking up trash or anything like that, but it's checking in on your teammates. It's sitting there, being friends off the field, the Longhorn, get to know each other nights that they have on Wednesday and Friday throughout the year. It certainly continues to trickle down, and that's exactly what you want as Sarkisian continues to build off of the momentum of going into the college football playoff semifinal.
Yeah, and you mentioned that. I also come to think of the situations where Sark himself is. We talk about building culture. I'm an older guy than you, CJ, so I've seen some good leaders and bad leaders in my days, right?
Sure.
I mean, and the ones that do it the best are usually the ones that are honest. And I think Sark has owned up to his own problems that he's had in the past and shared those with the team. And it makes him vulnerable to those guys. It makes him that much more believable.
It absolutely does. That vulnerability is something that a lot of recruits talk about. And they talk about winning the locker room back over. But when he sits down in those in-home visits and very early on in the coaching in his office, recruits sit there and say, I can look Sark in the eye and know that he's telling me the truth and he's being honest with me. Not a lot of coaches are that open and honest off the jump. And we're certainly hearing that from recruits all the time when it comes to Steve Sarkisian.
That's great, because that means that, again, it's about repeatable success. It's not just one time. It's not a one-trick pony. We want to be here multiple years to come. Doesn't have to happen every single year, but we'd like to be in these kind of situations 6 or 7 more times over the next 10 years. We'd
That
like
would
to
be
be
nice.
of the top 12 and in the college football playoff. That's not a insurmountable number, in my opinion, if they continue to recruit like they are, especially at quarterback, right? Because we know that's the position that Sark needs.
Absolutely.
You got 2 or 3 years maybe of Arch Manning. You got another year of Quinn Ewers. It's the most important position on the field, and you seem to have no problem getting the guys. I mean, what else do you want in recruiting?
Yeah, it's going.
Yeah, it is.
It's going.
It really is. No, I totally agree with that. All right. A couple other things to go over. I want to say thank you to our sponsor for this hour. That's Rick Vavro and his team at Austin Underground. Thank you very much, Rick, for being a sponsor in 2023 and renewing in 2024. Rick and his team help Austin get better. Since 2004, Austin Underground has specialized in difficult underground commercial installations. The team's engineering background gives Austin Underground the ability to perform work other firms often consider too risky. Rick Vavro and his team offer an end-to-end client experience, including seamless communication, budgeting, staffing, and top-notch trade partners. And most importantly, they produce solid quality work each and every time. We appreciate you, Rick. Thanks for being a sponsor in 2024 for On Texas Football. All right, lots of other questions and comments to get to. I'll go with one that I think is interesting. Let's talk about where'd it go? I mentioned turnovers a minute ago. Here it is. At Bama, we scored from Captain Americano. We scored 14 points in 16 seconds. We need turnovers or 3 and outs to flip the script, limit the number of UW offensive possessions. How many turnovers does Texas need? I think they got to have at least 1. 2 or 3 would be great, but you got to have at least 1 and maybe 1 or 2 3 and outs.
I like 2. 2 gives me confidence. 3, you win the game. You have to have at least 1. And that's not including a 4th down stop. That's a true take the ball away from your opponent and reap the benefits of a short field. Texas has to have at least 1. 2, I feel very confident about Texas's chances. 3, I think it's a win. What Texas cannot do is the flip side of that and give the ball away.
Yep.
It cost them the game against Oklahoma. Hasn't necessarily been a big issue otherwise, but there have been issues like we've seen against Baylor. The dropped punts cannot happen. And obviously red zone conversions continue to be at the utmost importance. You got to continue to punch the ball in and not leave points on the board there.
The only team that they gave up 3 turnovers to with Quinn at quarterback was Oklahoma. And they lost that game.
Yeah.
So I hear you.
Goal line stop in there as well.
Goal line stop. Hey, the JT Sanders interception on the goal line. Now, Texas came back and scored out of that, actually, because of the punt block by Manny Muhammad and the ensuing touchdown. But let's mention that. What about special teams? We talked to the Washington guy this morning, the beat reporter for them. He was very high on their special teams. You think that was misplaced exuberance on his part, or do you think they're that good?
Washington has very good special teams, and it's a sign of a good coach. You get to 13-0 in large part because of that third phase of the game, and we've seen it this year. Texas's special teams have made very impactful plays at very key moments. You mentioned the punt block just now. Behind that, I think a part of the games and the special teams that doesn't get a lot of shine is Keaton Crawford and Keelan Robinson downing punts inside the 10. We talk about Sanborn all the time in terms of him being a very good net punter. Those 2 gunners are very impactful on their own in their own right. Washington, I think, is going to surprise a lot of folks with how sound they are. There are not going to be a lot of big return opportunities for Xavier Worthy, Keelan Robinson in the kickoff return game as well. They're going to fit lanes well. They don't allow a lot of wiggle room, if you will, for ball carriers in that return game. So that's something that Texas probably won't have the luxury of unless something absolutely breaks or if they got something up their sleeve. So I'm looking at that as a pretty even matchup. But again, we saw it against Oklahoma. There will be some trickery in this special teams game. Because in a game like this, if you're able to steal a possession away by creating a first down out of special teams, that goes a long way. I think, whether it be a punt block or, a fake return or anything along the lines of that, someone's going to have a trick up their sleeve for special teams, and it's going to be a big momentum switch.
I'm looking for a punt block as much as anything. But no roughing the kicker.
Can't have it.
Don't give them an extra set of downs.
And don't give them a chance for a TCU flop as well.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Where it's a pretend pump issue.
He actually, that TCU punter actually DM'd me after that play.
What?
Yeah.
He DM'd you? Do you know him or something?
No, never met him. I can't say I follow the punting recruiting cycle all too closely, but I had tweeted the play, obviously, after the game, and it caused some ruffled feathers on Twitter, and he sent me back a few kiss emojis after that play. So he seemed to have fun. Obviously, they walked out awesome with the win that game, but yeah, they got to be careful there. They got to be careful there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're here at Manning's down off in Fulton Alley, right next to Harris Casino.
Cool spot.
Oh, it is unbelievable, and it's starting to really kind of fill out. Look at this, all of this. Guys, we have a bunch of footballs up here. I don't know if everybody's seen this, that we're going to be selling, not me personally, but Rick, the guys at the Texas One Fund selling. They have Jonathan Brooks' signature on them. They are the official balls of the Sugar Bowl. We also have a number of other things like this hat, signed hat also, 3 different styles. All of those things available. Just come up and ask Rick Vasquez about it, and he'll help you out. And maybe if you're interested, you certainly can get them. We also have this commemorative coin, which is my personal favorite. It's one of 2. So basically, this is the kind of coin they use to flip at the coin toss. Kind of cool. Have you ever seen one up close?
Not this close.
Yeah, me either.
You got heads or tails?
College football playoff, and then the Washington and the Longhorn logo helmets. Pretty good stuff. All right, I'm looking at all these games up here, and I'm kind of listening and watching. Any surprises to you at this point?
Wisconsin, can't lie, up 28-21 over LSU. I know LSU, not a good defense. Jaden Daniels isn't playing. Well, Wisconsin had plenty of issues and question marks themselves. So I'd say that's pretty good. Pretty good for Wisco.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Oregon's starting to take a little control of the game against
It was only a matter
Liberty.
of time.
Yeah, they start even without Bo Nix as well, by the way, for them. So all good there. All right, I'm gonna let you go from here, my man, and you do a little Texas fight for us, will you?
Oh.
And we want to do this about once every hour. We got to do it, CJ.
I think this will be the first time I've ever led a Texas fight.
What?
Yeah.
What? Even in school?
Never done it.
What?
I was always the fight guy,
Come on, CJ.
Someone had to do it.
We need to do it. Seriously. Here you go.
All righty. Texas!
Fight!
Texas!
Fight!
Texas!
Fight!
OU!
Sucks!
All right.
Good job.
Yeah,
I like that.
Good.
That was a good one, CJ.
Thank you, guys.
I enjoyed it.
That was fun.
All right.
Y'all saw
man.
it. First ever Texas fight.
All right, we're gonna step away here for about 30 minutes. Let some people have some time, get some food in them, etc. We'll be back on around 2:00 this afternoon, live from Manning's here in New Orleans. CJ, thank you. Rod will rejoin us here in a little bit as well at the top of the hour. But for now, for CJ Vogel, I'm Bobby Burton. This has been on Texas Football Live. Hook 'em.